Craig, welcome.
Thank you.
I'll let you get another gulp in. What's been going on in your life? You're always a busy man, aren't you?
Busier than a one-armed bricklayer in Beirut was the old saying, wasn't it, back in the day? And I don't think I've ever been so busy in all my life, to be honest with you, for a number of reasons. But it keeps you focused, keeps you occupied, keeps you out of trouble, as dear old mum used to say, which is quite right.
I listened to a lot of interviews leading up to this, just doing some preparation. I know you quite well. We've sat and had coffee numerous times, and 5 minutes turns into 3 hours.
Yeah. I knew you when you were a famous actor.
Don't blow the car off the doors.
All right.
That was a terrible Michael Caine accent.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing about it, all these interviews that I've watched and listened to, they all sound the same, and no disrespect. It's almost like it's always a time frame. This is why this is going to keep going as long as it goes for, where we can delve deep into each subject, because I think it's almost like when someone's interviewing you, that there's always a time restraint. They want to touch on the key points, the car park at Middlesbrough, the FA Cup final goal, the Predator, but you can't really go deep. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, it's a fair assumption. And it's always happened, and there's a lot more interesting stuff there beneath the surface, but who's got any time to talk about it, to come to studio and tell it? Who's got any time to listen to it?
We do today.
Well, that's what I'm getting to, and if there's somebody out there that's not so busy, you know what? I envy them. I envy them dearly, because time has become such a valuable commodity for all of us. And you don't tend to get very deep anymore on a lot of important stuff. He should be CEO of Football Federation Australia, and he should lead us out of this darkness that we find ourselves.
Do you think he'd do that if he was us?
Ange, if you're listening, it's your Uncle Craig here. This is probably the most in-depth I've ever got on the second part of the story. I'm hitting them pretty good, in the warm-up, right? And I hear some footsteps coming, people murmuring by me. I wonder who that is. Turn around, and it's Tiger. And he said, what's the photographer guy doing warming up?
Surfest, recently, finished. You loved your surfing, didn't you? You didn't get a chance to see any?
No, it's too busy. Surfest was on in our own backyard, and Merriweather, and I missed it this year because I like to photograph it as well. And they were always pretty good that way with that stuff, and let me get access to it. So. Never mind. I'll get it next year.
There was you recently went back to Liverpool, I think before Christmas, wasn't it? And they pulled that out of was it the museum at Enfield?
That's it. It's on the ceiling of the museum. Up the top, look, Surf Factory, Mick Burns. So his son's Jai Burns. So
wow.
that's a local Newcastle surfboard manufacturer. And that board itself, see Mick Burns, MB?
Yep.
Halfway down. So I'm not making this stuff up. It's there.
You had a few different ones, didn't you? That was a longboard.
That was a Malibu, longboard that Mick did for me, and it was fantastic. And funnily enough, the story behind that, I was out on that board down in Sydney the day that the Hillsborough disaster happened. And I was out surfing, and people were shouting from the shore, come in. I thought, well, there must be sharks or something going on. And they said, have you heard what's happened? I said, no. And they said, there's been a disaster at Hillsborough, the semi-final of the FA Cup against Forest, and a lot of people, Liverpudlians, have died. So, my God, just the whole thing hit me, and I thought, I got to get back. So I had to drop everything. I was working at Wide World of Sports at the time, living at Whale Beach, and I said, I just got to go. So I caught the next plane. I didn't know what I was going to see or do or hear, but then I got back and did what I could to help the club, because the whole place, was in a catastrophic state. Because when you go away to Sheffield to play in a semi-final, and 90 odd of your fans don't come back home, they're dead because of a crushing, and you don't know why. It's a big deal. So it's the first time I'd been back to the club for the 5 or 6 years that I'd retired, and I did. I stayed there for about 2 months and did what I could do. At the same time, people in Australia reached out, mostly English people, and particularly from Coogee for some reason. A big group of football supporters, English people, said, we need to raise money for some of the victims. Have you got anything you can give us so that we can auction it off charity? And it was a very emotional time for everybody. You remember the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, I've got my surfboard, my Liverpool surfboard. So they took it off me, and it was in Newcastle. I was overseas. And they auctioned it, and they raised a lot of money, and they sent the money back to the club and to the to the victims' appeal. God, I don't know why this gets emotional, and it's funny now. You know why I don't do podcasts, because when you tap into this stuff, it really gets you. So about 6 months later, when I was back home and working away, I got a phone call from Coogee, and it was the same chap that had sold my surfboard and raised money, and he said, me and my mates, we've all got together, and we've got you a new surfboard. Will you come down and let us present it? So I said, yeah, of course. So I have a surfboard with a Liverpool crest on it, and it was by those nice people from Coogee, Pommies, even some of the Man United supporters. Good on them. Good on them.
I mean, things like that, does bring people together, doesn't it? Sadly, it was a tragedy, but even so many different people from all walks of life, all different clubs. It's when it comes to tragedy, everybody. I mean, even if the recent, tragedy in the Liverpool parade, a lot of other clubs have given support to Liverpool in regards to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it all seems to happen to Liverpool. It's funny. It's funny. It's not funny. It's interesting how it works. Funny's a bad word. Interesting how the whole thing works. And Manchester United had a tragedy with the Busby Babes, a plane crash, and a lot of the players and the coaching staff died years ago, 1958, I think, in Munich. And it's part of the fabric of Manchester United, that story, like Heysel and Hillsborough is for Liverpool. And it then creates this incredible sort of culture, which is what Liverpool is all about. And people think it's about the team. And players come and go, and managers come and go. And a lot of them completely from overseas now, very little Scousers. But Liverpool's not about the team itself. The team will always win. And that's because the Scousers, the native Liverpudlians that support Liverpool, there's two teams obviously, Everton as well, and they're just as passionate about their team, Everton. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. And there's so much banter and crack between the two sides, and both of them have a love for disliking Manchester United and Manchester City, which is also kind of amazing. So often in Australia, 12,000 miles away from the UK, that culture, and Liverpool in particular, journalists, good-meaning journalists, they'll ask me, what's the big deal with this Liverpool, What's the big deal with Liverpool? There's Barcelona, there's Real Madrid, there's, Paris Saint-Germain. Why is Liverpool? I said, because it's not about the team per se. It's about the culture of the people that insist, it's a good word, that team is the best in the world at all times, every weekend, night and day, that they win. They've just won another 20th League Championship.
Mm-hmm.
Did
you watch it? Yeah, just staying on that little bit. Did you watch many games? Did you get up and watch them, or?
Yeah, you know what? I used to religiously, but and I lived in America for 20 years, so the time frame was a little bit better. It was like, 6 and 7 in the morning rather than 2 and 3 in the morning. And not as much as I should. I know that. I'll get back to it once my workload comes down a bit. But I still love it passionately. I think there's too much money in the game. I think the players get paid too much, for sure. It's all supporters' money through broadcasting or merchandising or ticketing or, sponsors through buying the sponsors' goods. All comes from the fans, the people. So I just wanted to round that whole thing off about Liverpool. You've got to live there to understand why these people are uniquely special in their look on life. So being an Australian, I'm very, very proud of my culture and where I come from and what I stand for and the country stands for, or did. Very proud of it and keen to, get back to basics going forward. But to live in Liverpool, the culture is just completely different. The way people think, what they say, why they say it, how they say it, the accent. But when it comes to football, you can't escape it. So I also happen to think that I'm a little bit unique now as a person, a human being, because if you live in Liverpool, your way of thinking about the world turns upside down. And a lot of it's driven by irony and a sense of humour. And three things, the currency in Liverpool, is football, music, and comedy. So those three things drive all the Liverpudlians. And your social standing is hooked into what you know or what you've done in those three things, and or how much you love it, and it's quite remarkable. 12,000 miles away, we've got things they haven't, right, in their culture, and they've got things that we haven't. But I loved my time there, and it wasn't just winning, league championships and Champions Leagues and FA Cup finals. It wasn't just the team; it was the whole Liverpool package.
I think too, in the 80s, Australia got there's a lot of Liverpool supporters in Australia, and I think you don't realise how much of an impact you going over playing for Liverpool did in regards to people supporting. I suppose a little bit like Ange coaching Spurs. All of a sudden, there's Spurs supporters coming out of the woodwork.
But by the way, Ange was a Liverpool fan.
Yes, I know. I know.
So
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, yeah, but that's the thing with that. Even the Walk Alone book. A lot of people read that, and I suppose it goes into different things where Liverpool's sort of form dropped off in the '90s. All of a sudden, Manchester United. People love getting on a winner sometimes, and all of a sudden, we spawned a lot of Manchester United supporters in Australia. But just with the book, I mean, I've actually said to you, I'd love to write your second book, because I believe your life is even more interesting than the book itself, like from the point of the end of that last chapter to where you are now.
Yeah.
There's so much has happened since.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. And you know what, Michael? I'd like to write it too. But where do you get the time?
Yeah.
You don't.
I
You
actually
don't.
thought about that. I thought if I did that, if you actually let me do that, but I don't know how I would be able to nail you down for 5 minutes to do it.
Me neither. And that's what I just said, which is why I've decided to stop a lot of projects that I've been working on, big projects and local and global, all to do with football and soccer, and actually finally tell my own story once and for all in my own words, pictures and music. And this goes back to the question you asked me about the second story, the second stage of my life, the second part, the second book. So I'm going to tell that story, right, in a modern day environment and structure and format. And what I'm getting to is I just find my life, I can't do one thing at a time or two things. I have to do 3 or 4 things at a time. So, right, people come and ask me if they can write a book. People come and ask me if they can do a Netflix documentary. People come and ask me if I'll do a sportsman's lunch. And because I'm working on this other stuff, I say no. So I thought, hang on, I'm going to put a stake in the ground here because I'm 64 years old, not getting any younger, right? It's remarkable how the motivation is taken away from you when age starts to strike in its profound way. So I thought, no, I have to get on and tell my story as soon as possible before it's too late. But the second part of the story, so it's a stage show and it's not a sportsman's lunch. It's more Billy Elliot meets the boy from Bullaroo. That's what I say. So it's my own words, pictures, and music. Oh, there's a poster. Yep. Do you like the poster?
It's lovely.
I did that.
So that's the front. That's the front of the Walk Alone book, isn't it? That picture.
The player. Yes, yes. So I put that together in Photoshop because if you see it says Craig Johnston, his own words, pictures, and music. That's the key to everything. Because over the years, I've always been a photographer. I've written music every single day. You saw me in the studio today. I probably took 25 pictures of the environment because it's just inside of me.
Yeah.
I'm a creative.
Yeah.
The reason became a football player with a team like that is because I'm creative, not because I was particularly good at soccer. I was pretty good, but there was better players in the team than me. Peter Tredenick, Malcolm McClelland, Brett Cowburn, Michael Bogart, they were all in the same team as me. So when you talk about culture, that's where I grew up. So back to your question. The second part of the story is much more interesting than the first part. And I've found these parts in the second far more tough and grueling and hard work than actually playing for Liverpool when I couldn't even make the under-13s Lake Macquarie rep team, 13s and 14s. They said I wasn't good enough, and maybe they were right.
It's funny, I ran into a fellow by the name of Lloyd Hards a couple of weeks ago who used to play with and against you.
Yeah.
And he said pretty much what you said. He goes, Craig Craig wasn't the best out of those
Yeah.
those people.
Lloyd was a very, very
Yeah,
good player, by the way.
absolutely.
So he knows what he's talking about, and he was a bit of a god in the day.
Yeah.
But carry on.
I actually asked him because I've heard you say that so many times, but I've always wondered, okay, what was Craig's downfall? Why wasn't he as good as these guys? Were these other guys just generally gifted? And he said, look, he goes, to be honest, he said, when Craig went over, we thought he'd come back pretty quickly. He was a great player, don't get me wrong, and on his day, he was untouchable. But he said to me, have you ever heard the saying of sometimes you beat yourself? He said he'd have the ball and he'd be going inside and out and turning players left, right and centre, beat a couple of players and then lose the ball. It was almost like he was a rough diamond that just needed that little bit of a polish. And somehow he got that polish over there. And he was so proud when you went on with it. Because again, even, I suppose your peers even probably at the time doubted you.
You know what? 100%. So I'm just going to embellish Lloyd's perspective and yours because I mentioned those names. All grew up at Burrigal High School and in and around Spears Point, Bullaroo there. When I started having a little bit of success after a couple of years at Middlesbrough, they all piled over to England saying, if he can make it, I can make it. And then they all came back home with their legs between their tails because it was so tough and hard over there and life was so good over here and they were homesick and they missed their girlfriends and what have you. So my strength in life... And I'm going to answer your question. Lloyd Hards had a gift for playing football. So did those other names, Tredenick, Boga. But, they had a better gift than me. But I had the gift of resilience. I had the gift of blocking things out mentally. I might be a sook when I remember stuff, and I don't like that at all. It pees me off. But getting the job done... And putting a shift in, as we used to call it, a training session for 3 and 4 hours, that's better than a shift down the mine or at the coal works or the shipbuilding places or the BHP, So I'm glad you talked about Lloyd. He was there. But if you talk to any of them, Noah wasn't the best player. And... no, I couldn't get in the rep team under 13s, 14s, Lake Macquarie. My dad thought I was good enough to, so he took me out of Lake Macquarie because he thought the politics was too bad, and he put me in the Newcastle comp. And I actually played for Lambton, and I actually got in the rep team for Newcastle.
Wow!
So there was some truth there, which is part of why the decision was made by myself to try and go overseas to get away from the politics.
Yeah. That Burrigal High school team, that was a gun team. It was funny, just staying on Lloyd mentioned that the standard of football was so strong in the area at that time. He said, and I think Lloyd, he said, played for Wallsend High. And he said, I remember that they had to play Tech High, which is now Merriweather High. Now, Merriweather, I think, won the state cup in schools, I think 3 times. Burrigal twice, and I think Wallsend won it once. He said the amazing thing about it, he said we drew Tech High in the first round and we beat them 2-1. We went on and won the state cup. We ended up, we had to go to Tamworth, we had to go everywhere, and we ended up playing a team from Sydney and we won 3-0, the final 3-0. He said that first round game against Tech High was the hardest game we played in the whole tournament. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? That group of kids going, at the same time. And that was another thing too. He mentioned it was around when KB United started, and Lloyd did play for KB United. Yeah. There was a lot of Englishmen that came out to play for KB United. And it got a lot of people offside, a lot of the local clubs, because they knew they had players like your Tredenicks and Boogards and going, why aren't these... And they did play for KB, but there was this monopoly of Englishmen that came out, and it really didn't sit well with the local clubs regarding that, because we knew, he said that 11 should have been nearly all Novocastrians.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's a component of that, of course, but then when you start to talk about Kenny Bowden, And
He's my idol.
hello, that's why I said it. Reminded me very much of Peter Beardsley as a player as well. The same kind of move about him. So I think we had the best of both worlds. And I know what you mean. So I'm agreeing with you. But we did. We had all those people from Lake Macquarie, great Australian players there. They were there. But now they were shown a masterclass by people that had this much better fluency. So now you had British football meets Northern New South Wales football. I say the Hunter region. I grew up around the lake, and our idols were Ray Bartz and Bunny Curran and Joey Senkowski. What a player! Mm. Joey went over when he heard I was over there, and he came back pretty quick smart as well, because it was tough. It was brutal. It was the only way. It was a toxic male environment of the highest order, and bullying was the mode of the day. In fact, you were judged by how much of a bully you were, right? Meaning you were judged in a positive way. The more you could bully people, the higher your ratings were. Now, and I know we're laughing because that sounds absurd in this day and age, but in that day and age, the currency of behaviour was bully your way through everything. It was. How old are you, Michael?
Well, I'm 53.
Okay, so you're 11 years younger than me. Yeah, and with each 10-year generation, there's been a change and a shift, and I see it because I like it. I love it. I love the cultural fabric of communities and ages, and the whole looking through people's attitudes according to how old they are, where they live, and why. So I call it the currency of behaviour. And one day, apart from the second part of the book, I want to write a book, The Currency of Behaviour, which is why people do things, how they do them, and what the outcome is. Because we're all products of the currency of our behaviour, and our parents' behaviour, and our community's behaviour, you see. So there was this remarkable thing going on over at Burrigal High School and Spears Point East, Spears Point and Bullaroo primary schools. At Tralba as well. Remarkable culture was going on that filled half of that KB team, which was to start with, one of the best teams in Australia. So how do we get back to that, Michael? I've just sort of, that's my mission in life. How do we get back to that old-fashioned common sense, hard work, meritocracy, where nothing's for nothing, and you've got to earn your stripes, right? And that's where you get the love and the respect of your teammates from, and your community, through doing the right thing. Hello. That's kind of interesting to me.
It sort of touches on when I interviewed Mark Viduka. He mentioned when he was at the AIS, it was the same mould of players which went on to become the golden generation. And he said that when we played overseas teams, like sometimes the AIS would go to South America and play a little tour at the end of the season, sort of thing. We'd be playing South American teams, and they were actually surprised by our physicality in the contests, and they'd probably beat us 2-0, but they knew they were in a game.
Yes.
And he said we're trying to match overseas for skill, which is a good thing, but he feels like, he said, I feel like we've lost that physical, bark that was on us.
Well, he's 100% right. Now we've got neither. Stop. Now we've got neither. But we've got a tremendous media influencers telling us how good it all is. And it's not good. Viduka was right. And Similar to the Burrigal High School culture, we had that golden generation, that brilliant golden generation of mostly trying to find a word, sons and daughters of first-generation immigrants from the great footballing nations of Croatia and Italy and Greece and Macedonians as well, British as well. You mentioned them, Kenny Bowden and people like that. So there was an incredible culture of that generation that was so profound that it got us to the quarterfinal of the World Cup, and we were cheated out of a semi-final place in Germany by the Italians. I was there at the game, and we were cheated out of that. We should have been in the semi-final. So, and we were good enough to be in the semi-final because of the culture of the Zelics and the Ocons and the Vidukas and the Kuhls and the Cahills, names of the Bosnich, you know, it goes on and on and on and on. You name them, you name it more. They were all there. And you know what? When the World Cup was over, you know where they went? Most of them? They went back to first division teams across Europe, in Germany, in Italy, in England, in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. The World Cup we just had in Qatar. How many players after the World Cup, and everybody's telling us how well the results were, I didn't see it, but how many players went back and played for first division European clubs?
Not many at all. Not many at all.
None. Maybe one. So am I making it up? Am I the bad guy for saying this? But you are. You become the bad guy for saying, hey, the performance isn't where it used to be because the culture's not where it used to be. Where did the culture used to be? The culture used to be with old-fashioned backyard skills like they do in Croatia on the cobblestone streets, like they do across where all the great European players come and South American players come from the ghettos, the slums. Mm. That's where Maradona and Messi and all of those great players came from. Neymar. They don't come from Maradona's on your T-shirt. There you go. You know it.
But the Craig Johnston one's in the wash today.
Yeah, mate, leave it there.
Did you ever play against Diego?
No, I never played against him. No. But I
you met him?
Yeah, and I had the joy of watching him. I actually met him. I think Australia played Brazil in Germany, and Australia played. I think it was Brazil, but Maradona was at the game. Yeah. So and I was sitting kind of next to him. So I said, told him I was Australian. He went, "Oh, good luck today," you know, and then he went, "Oh, okay." And then I said, "And I play for Liverpool too." And he went, "What? Liverpool?" He said, "How's an Australian play for Liverpool?" I said, "Mate, a lot of hard work."
I was actually just spieling through some info online, and for some reason I was thinking I thought about Zico.
Yeah,
you know, which was pretty much the Brazilian version of Maradona at the time.
He was the best player in the world,
and we got some. Yeah. I think we got some vision of you. You played. It was the Intercontinental Cup in Japan.
That's right.
You were there.
Oh, there you go.
And I think you played Flamengo, which had Zico, and it was almost like the actual clip is called Zico versus Liverpool.
Yeah, that's right.
He was almost like untouchable that day.
That's right. There's a couple of good stories, but behind that, that's the one there. I think I'm pretty sure that's it. Independiente, that was. Which was another World Club Championship that I played in. Yeah.
But you played in two, didn't you? There was another one here.
Yeah, so Zico was the best player in the world. This is actually Independiente.
This is Independiente, so it was the other one, Dave. But that was the thing. It was even after that game, which we'll see, here it is.
That's Zico there.
Zico. It's almost like he had the ball on a string, and he's playing against you guys, which at the time were the best team in the world. It was almost like humiliating.
I can't remember losing too many games, but I just got to the club, so this was one of the first games I actually played. Because
you went to the European Cup final, didn't you, in 81, and you obviously didn't take part, but you played in this game.
That's right, yeah.
And
that's when I just signed when they played the Madrid Cup final. I think that's me trying to hound him down. Well, there's four of us trying to hound him down.
It was like...
yeah.
And there was a famous quote that, because Graham Souness played in that game with you.
Yes.
And Graham said after the game, before the game, I wanted to see whether Zico would cop a nice hard physical knock, which Graham tended to like doing to other players at times.
Yes.
The problem was I couldn't get 2 yards near him.
That's right, 100% right. And, when I mentioned bullying culture, those words that you've just used sum it up, but for everybody, not just for Graham, who was a very, very hard man, very, very, very brutally hard player.
But he's the sort of player that every team needs in the middle, do you think?
Yeah. Well,
like an enforcer.
I once, very much so, like the mafia. I once heard him describe, because he was such an elegant player as well, and funnily enough, at that time, a very elegant man. He's almost James Bond-like.
Yeah.
He had this aura about him. And
I think he still does.
Yeah, he does. I saw him just before Christmas over in Liverpool, and he does. And it's almost like he'll walk into a bar or a club or restaurant, and the music stops, and people stop eating, and they're clinking that, and everybody looks at him. And I've only seen that for a few people in my life. One of them was one of your forefathers, Michael Caine. Another one was Telly Savalas. I'm being serious here.
Yeah.
Actors have that charisma. Now, Graham, when he'd walk into the room, he'd stop the room. And now and again, when he'd walk onto a football field, he'd stop the football field. So I got on really well with him. In fact, I was at Middlesbrougugh with Graham.
Well, he was really... did you feel that his influence really got you to Liverpool because of the fact that he knew you from Middlesbrough? That was that little linchpin that got you from one bridge to the other?
Yes, and no doubt, because I think he'd seen me come as a 15-year-old, seen me get blasted by Jack Charlton and banished to the dressing rooms and the chores of the apprentices and banished to the car park. Graham saw that, but he saw my attitude and how I would then clean the players' cars and their boots for some money to try and make the money to get back home. Because when my parents sold their house, all we could afford was a one-way trip. So I'd been told to leave the club and I had no money. So I had to find some money, and that's what I did. I cleaned the boots, cleaned the cars. But Graham was my first customer. And those boots, Michael, were sparkling. And his car, I think it was a Johnston something or other. He was almost like, what's that funny movie where they say, "Shag me, baby"? What's that called? What's his name?
Know that one.
Yes, you do. It's a famous movie. Yeah, baby, shag me, baby.
It's Austin Powers.
Austin Powers, thank you.
I was about to say, please don't Google that, because something very inappropriate will come up.
No, Graham, because that was kind of the era where Austin Powers was doing his stuff back in the swinging 60s when the Beatles were going off. And Graham sort of was in that era. So he had that sort of charisma about him, and you expected Marianne Faithfull to come through the, and be on his arm, because he was a James Bond type of character, but charisma.
Yeah.
The room would stop. So if Graham says that about Zico, who was known to be the best player in the world, and we've just seen those were the two best teams in the world playing in Tokyo at the end of the season. So the World Club Championship or the Toyota Cup, was it the winners of the Champions League versus the winners of the Copa America or the South American Champions League. So what you just saw there was a complete and utter disregard for the ability of the Liverpool players, 4 or 5 of them, I was one of them, to get anywhere near Zico because his skills were that good. Yeah. And coming from Graham Souness, I think he's rarely said that about anybody.
Just staying on that, in regards to the European Cup, and obviously you played in a fair few of those and won one in '84. Do you feel that the Champions League style now, where there's group phases and all that sort of stuff, a lot harder in your day because they'll just knock out home and away, and you were playing in some pretty tough play. You know, the last place you'd want to go was like playing Red Star in Belgrade, wouldn't it? You know.
Well, that's right, and I did, and we won. So the European Cup morphed into the Champions League, but it was a knockout competition, and then UEFA figured out it was much easier to have a round robin kind of for the money, and it's all about money, all about money. So we've seen it change over the years from being all about love and passion and pride and what have you, and now it's just money, money, money. And it's getting worse. It's getting worse. So it's a shame. It's a shame. But isn't it lovely to see old-fashioned clips and see how good people were? Now you said Zico was the Maradona of Brazil. And he was. He was.
Because he had a big world. I think later on, the next year, he was the 1982 World Cup, and he was a star for Brazil in that. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, magic, eh? Oh. Magic.
I tell you another person. We talk about idols or people you looked up to. I mean, your dad used to call you Reg.
Yes.
After Reg Date.
Yes.
A famous Northern New South Wales player.
Yes.
Again. Where's the statue for Reg Date? Because just there he is there, the Bradman of the Don Bradman of football.
He's a big boy. They probably don't have enough brass or whatever you make statues out of.
I'll just tell you some stats here. So he played for Wallsend between 1938 and 1944. 100 there he is there. Now look at this. It looks like and he used to hit the ball with such ferocity, I was told.
Yes.
And especially those balls. That's an old leather ball. It looks like this guy's trying to get out of the road.
It's like a cannonball, that's why. It's full of explosive. But no, that's what he was famous for, the hardest shot in the world, they said he had. My dad said he had the hardest shot in the world.
And so again, back to 1938 to 1944 for Wallsend, he played 107 times, 166 goals in 107 appearances. Yeah. And then he went to Canterbury Bankstown for 2 years, 94 goals in 39 games.
Yeah.
Back to Wallsend again. This is blowing your mind too, isn't it, David? 6 years, 154 goals in 93 games. So that's a total of 300 appearances on the money, 414 goals in 300 games. Played only 5 games for Australia and scored 8 goals. I just, you see those sort of stats.
Yeah,
it's up against anything you'd ever hear.
Yeah. Well, I'll say then, he was a Maradona and a Zico of Australia, but from Wallsend and played at Crystal Palace.
Yeah,
and he also owned later on. He owned the Albion pub in Newcastle.
I didn't know that.
So when all the blokes would knock off from the BHP and the steelworks, they'd come straight to the Albion. So he was the boss there, and he was renowned for being the hardest and the toughest man in that whole environment.
So he could pretty much be the publican and the bouncer at the same time.
He was. And he loved the blue. So my dad knew him. My dad idolised him. So that's why my dad called me Reg. He would never call me Craig. I think that's probably a name that came from Mum.
Yeah.
in fact, that there is a story where
Reggie Johnston has a good ring to it, a good footballing name.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. I wear it like a badge. I always have, and a lot of guys that I know, they call me Reg. They don't call me Craig, which is great. It's a badge of honour. Reminds me of Dad, so I love it. You know, I've never had a fight in my life, but
this is what I love about this chat here is that you mentioned it in the book. You've mentioned it a few times. You were named after Reg, but now we're actually talking about him, about why, what sort of a player he was, and a person. Because I mean, my dad had a milk run in Hamilton, and Reg lived on this milk run.
Okay.
And I was only yay high, and my dad said one day, "I'm going to introduce you to this man. You're going to shake his hand." And I couldn't understand, and I shook this guy's hand. I couldn't understand why. Yeah. He said, "You'll thank me in years to come." And I did, because I didn't know who it was, but that was Reg Date.
Yeah. Well, you thank your dad. Thank your dad. And serious, because at the end of the day, there's stories and there's stories, but there's stats behind what you just read there, and that just shows a prolific, sportsman, time after time, in a tough environment. So, good on him.
Another person that was been in a tough environment lately, Ange Postecoglou at Spurs. It's sort of. It's a shock, but not a shock, if that makes sense. It was almost like there was a lot of word that it was coming even before that Europa League final. Your thoughts, should he have been sacked?
I'm a very big Ange fan, for a number of reasons. And when Liverpool came and played in Australia, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago for the first time at the MCG, they were playing against Melbourne Victory. So Ange asked me to... There you go, talk of the devil. He asked me to come and talk to the players, the Victory players, before the game, at the training session before the game. So I did. And basically, he really appreciated what I said, and I'll tell you in a minute. But they played really well that day, because it was a very simple message. And I said, anybody nervous, put your hand up. They all put their hand up. I said, think about this way. They've got 2 arms and their 2 legs, all of them, right? So have you, right? So there's your starting point. I said, but everything they do, they'll do it faster and more accurately than you do. That's all. I said, so rather than waiting for the ball to come to you before you understand where it's going to go next, think a second or 2 ahead. And at the time, just on that training ground there, they were actually playing 6-a-side against each other. I said, so start with a game again, but think 2 seconds ahead of the ball, right? And look to see who's running off the ball, who's reading you. So anyway, I did. It was just simple advice. But at the end of the day, there's a science in football, and I've always loved that science. It's what got me out of the Middlesbrough car park and to be the most expensive player in the world, albeit for a couple of days. But I got there, from the car park to that. And it's all to do what I just said, and I said to the players on those days. So there's a science to skill. And to this day, people aren't listening.
What I love about this, about the fact that Ange brought you in, he had the foresight to know he loves his history, and he's a Liverpool supporter. To bring you in, knowing that just some of your words could translate to his players, and he does that well. He always looks at his, I suppose, forefathers of the game for advice.
Well, of course.
But that's not sort of happening now, is it? It's almost we don't listen to the older players.
Well, that's right, and that's part of the problem. It's not rocket science. Well, actually, you know what? It's. I'll take that back. It is rocket science. What I said to the players there's a science, right? If you look at good players, they lose the ball less often than bad players, and they give the ball more accurately and faster than bad players. And confidence is a currency in the team. And if you're confident that you can give someone the ball, make a run and you'll get it back, you'll do it. If you're not confident in that player or you don't like that player as a person, you're not going to give it to him. Nobody talks like this. It's the fundamentals of the game. And Ange talks fundamentally at times about the game, but that's what I learnt in my career, is that there is a tolerance here, and every time you make a mistake on the field, it's because you don't get the ball quick enough and you don't give it quicker or accurately enough. And fundamentally, there's only two things a player ever does for 90 minutes on the football field. And yes, a girl or boy, they'll run around, they'll shout, they'll scream, they'll say, give me the ball, they'll do stuff. But there's two things they do. They get the ball and they give it. And if they make a mistake, it's because they don't control it fast and accurately enough, and they don't give it fast and accurately enough. Now, the more you practice the ball, like Zico did when he was a kid, like Paul Ocon did when he was a kid, like Viduka or Kuehl or Cahill or Craig Johnston did, or Peter Tredenick, or Reggie Date did when he was a kid. If you don't practice and love the ball and uncover the mystery of what part of foot on what part of ball to what effect, you don't have skill. And unfortunately, everybody covers it up now with excuses about coaches or got the wrong boots, I haven't got the Predators on, how can I be skillful? That's rubbish.
The question was, should Ange be sacked? I love how we went down that little that little other narrative. But do you think he should have been sacked?
It's all part of the same way of thinking. If you come 18th, 17th in the league, there's three teams below you, and you get beat by every team in the league except for two, you're struggling in the Premier League. You really are. Especially with a squad of very expensive players, and you've now got the best stadium in Europe. So unfortunately, there's a reality, and I think a lot of people get carried away with the fantasy, and the reality is not addressed. And I think if you're the owner of any other Premier League team, and you look at Tottenham, who's finished, I think their worst ever for a long, long time, right? You start to say, well, no, we can't take that risk. Now, the glory side of it and the beautiful side of it, he called out the journalists and he said, no, I don't think I'll win on my second season. I always win. It's a lovely quote, and there's something to me that says this allows Ange to finish on top. Because if he'd got 3 or 4 games into the new season and that, God forbid, they had 3 or 4 draws and defeats, he'd be tarnished, he'd be rubbished, so would Daniel Levy and the rest of the Enoch crowd that owned the club with that decision. But now he's won that trophy and he can go on and do something else. Now, you know what I'd love to see happen? Listen to this. The game's in a mess here, but you've got this charismatic figure who's a people person. He should come home and they should give him an honorary role, right? James Johnston's just gone to Canada, right? Danny Townsend's gone to Qatar. We need a captain to steer our ship. And Ange should come home, right? And with the extraordinary payout he'll be given, he should come and buy the A-League. And I don't mean an A-League team, I mean the A-League, right? And he should be CEO of Football Federation Australia, and he should lead us out of this darkness that we find ourselves.
Do you think he'd do that if he was asked?
Ange, if you're listening, it's your Uncle Craig here. Mate, between us, Ange, we both love our country and we both love our game of soccer, the world's biggest game. Please, Ange, can you come home and steer us out of the wilderness, because we need your knowledge, your credibility, your love of the game and of the fans to come and show us all the way. And furthermore, Ange, I'll put my stuff on hold. It's soccer stuff anyway, and I'll work with you. How about that?
Oh, that'll be a good duo. Dave, clip that up, put it in an audio file, and send it to Ange straight away. Stat.
There you go. Yeah, come on back home, Ange, because we all love you, and we know that you love that little soccer ball, and we know that you know what you're talking about. And how about you win us the Asian Championships in your second year, and then the World Cup in your fourth year?
Because that was only 10 years ago he won the Asian Cup. With Australia. A decade.
Stop there. So I'm not talking nonsense. I'm not talking nonsense. So why couldn't that happen?
I think personally for him, I think he just loves being a manager, and I think the next, whether he goes to Spain or I think leaving England will probably be his next step. But again, it's almost like when he goes to a club, he sets down the ground rules. This is the way it's going to be. No one gets in the way, which is a little bit like your mentality as well when you think of it.
Yeah, and it's probably why he left Australia in the first place. I remember that, because they weren't doing. Yeah. But it's different now. If he comes back home, what's wrong with Australia as a club? What's wrong with? You see, we've been copying soccer for a long time and copying what happens overseas, right? But when you look at the sport of cricket, we're innovators. When you look at rugby league and going to Vegas, we're innovators. When you look at rugby union, we're innovators. We are. But soccer, we're always copying everyone else. The best way to protect football is to leave it alone. But with the metaverse coming up and all the tech giants looking for more goals in less time with the same great brands and the same great stadiums in a new format shot in 3D for the Google and the Vision goggles coming up on the metaverse with streams of data coming in live. Hello, how's that not the future? Mm-hmm. It's like years ago I had this idea for something stupid. You know what it was?
What's that?
A rubber soccer shoe. And everybody said, oh, you're an idiot, including Graham Souness. Mm-hmm. It'll never work. Look, can't you do something adult, And I said, no. And it's the same with the Big Bash of soccer. I called it the Big Bash of soccer because cricket, it works for cricket. And it is going to work for soccer, and it's going to happen because you know why, Michael? Because I'm going to make it happen.
Because you did a prototype of this too. I think we've got it as well. Is it the Soccer Sixes?
Soccer Sixes.
What I found incredible about that you got some of the best known people in football in the world in the one spot to do this. So obviously they could see something in it as well. You were with Cruyff on the sideline, I mean, how hard was that to get them all in the same place at the same time for that?
It was very hard, let me tell you. It's called Euro Super Sixes.
I think if you scroll down,
Euro Sixes.
All the way, there's a YouTube clip down.
Yeah, Euro Soccer Sixes, I think it was
Here it
called.
is.
It can't be done. I'll just tell you the story behind it very quickly because it's important. So I had this idea 25 years ago because do you know what Barcelona will do tomorrow morning in training or Liverpool or any of the world's biggest clubs? You know what they'll do in training? They will play six-a-side against each other. They might do some shooting at goal and some crossing a ball, some tactical. But then what players love is to play six-a-side against each other. Why? Minimum running, maximum skill, maximum scoring, maximum saving of the goalkeeper. So the whole idea is that at the time, a group had formed called the G14. And the G14, right, have morphed into the Dirty Dozen years later. 14 biggest clubs in Europe wanted to break away and create their own league. So then Mr. Blatter, who's running FIFA, and Platini, who was running UEFA, said, well, you need to go and see Craig Johnston because he's got this idea called non-football commerce. And what's non-football commerce? Well, it's the same great teams, same great stadiums. That one there's the Amsterdam Arena, right? But six-a-side, an hour long, 4 quarters of 15 minutes, but you're guaranteed 20 goals per game. So what you do is you bring real-size goals, real grass. There's Johan Cruyff there. And this was the opening of the Amsterdam Arena. That was shot in London. This was pre-pilots to get the actual game itself. If you just hold it there for 1 sec. I'll come back to you. Yeah. If you just, that's the funny thing. That there was in London, just near West Ham. So Robbie Slater was playing for West Ham in one of those pilots. So we had Coventry versus somebody, and then West Ham versus somebody. And actually, Robbie Slater was actually playing in that. That was to get the backing of FIFA and UEFA. I had to do that's Charlton Athletic versus West Ham, I think it was.
So you put all this together. Was this all your money?
It was all my money. It was all my money.
Couldn't you have got? I mean, did you go to backers that could?
No. I knew what I was doing, and I've always been able to do clever things cheaply. Oh, there he is. Robbie on the ball.
There you go.
See, ginger hair. There he is. Small world, eh? It's good old Robbie. So the point is that I said professional six-a-side is basically the sweating of your assets and bringing the clubs more money, but it's not costing anybody anything. But the entertainment value in getting 4 teams together. So they wouldn't agree to start with. FIFA and UEFA wouldn't agree. But then the 4 clubs said, yes, you can have all of our players, all of our brands. Look, Davids, Baggio, Kluivert, Litmanen, Overmars, McManaman, James. Look, Barnes, Redknapp, Gascoigne, McCoist. $300 million back then. And Johan Cruyff, he was president of the company, my company. And look at the spectacle. It was just sensational.
But with this, just staying with this, I mean, you went to FIFA and UEFA and you got it over the line. What amazes me, you've gone to these big organisations to get it over the line. So why doesn't Football Australia, the British FA, I know that you're at loggerheads with them, which ultimately sent you bankrupt.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying that a prophet's never recognised in his own country, and I know.
But do you feel, in regards to you already went through this process, 2004 with the Super Skills, with the English FA, and the same thing, it's like history repeated itself with Football Australia in regards to knocking on the door and not letting you come in and saying this is what we should do.
That's right. It's
do you feel that? Do you feel like it just?
Of course. Well, the bureaucrats and gatekeepers, and apparently, and I've heard this third party, I terrify them because I've got imagination, creativity, credibility, and that terrifies them, apparently. So...
is it a case of... I find it even with television as well. Back in the day, you could go to a television station, somehow get up to the boss and say, I've got this great idea for a show, the main event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great, Craig, here you go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's people within that building, that's their job to make shows like that.
Yes.
So if you come in, you're coming from the outside saying, hey, I've got a great show.
Yeah.
The people inside that have got jobs are saying, if we let this guy in, it's going to make us look like idiots because we should be thinking of this. Our bosses are going to start looking at this. Is that the same sort of thing as what in television, for instance? It's the same thing with football. You come in with a good idea. It's almost like, no, we've already employed people to make these ideas.
Well, it's a human phenomenon, and it's called the politics of the office, and you've just nailed it. I'm getting paid a lot of money to come up with these ideas. This guy's just made me laugh. I'm going to lose my mortgage, and my wife's going to hate that.
So it's easier to say no than say yes.
Absolutely. That's what it is. It's the way of the world. You've got a gatekeeping bureaucratic setup now that protects its own, I'm going to say the word, mortgage. Because it's human nature. So you can only go so far to say, oh, that's wrong, you can't do that. But people need to pay their mortgage. So it's the way that the politics of people and the currency of behaviour, as I've been explaining to you, it's all morphed so that innovation has been killed, which is why the economy is in such a dreadful mess, because of big government's overreach now, and big governments also come into sport, as we see. You get this maverick like Vlandis who will come along. Imagine if Vlandis was running Australian soccer.
I've actually asked him.
Wow. Yeah. Well. Nice idea. I love it. That's the thinking. You see. If more people were thinking this way.
I didn't actually ask him to do it. What I said, because I do speak to him every now and then through to the stories I did with him in the past. But I said to him hypothetically, I said, you're from Greek heritage, why aren't you a football fan? He goes, oh, no, I grew up watching rugby league. It's fair enough, So he's managing the sport that he loves, which is great. But I just said, I want to give you a hypothetical. What would you do if you're the CEO of Football Australia? Just hypothetical. He said, oh, Michael, I don't know. Well, to be honest, I haven't got my head around it. But the thing that keeps coming up in conversation is state federations. So, and it sounds like they're mostly the problem. So I would just obliterate them. I'd just get rid of them the next day. First day, they're gone. I said, well, that's going to cause a lot of legal ramifications. And he said, well, if there's a problem, you've got to get rid of it.
Yeah. Two interesting things. If there's a problem, you've got to get rid of them. There's legal implications. Now, the legal implications are part of that bureaucratic stranglehold because do you know those lawyers, they got mortgages as well. So that's why they're going to fight you see. And it's now what's taken over. If you look at Doge and what Donald Trump sort of has uncovered in terms of the bureaucratic waste of money, trillions and trillions. Similarly, you can chase the problem. Follow the money. It's the old adage, and we all know that. Follow the money, and where are the new ideas that have been allowed through by people that are not going to get a clip on the ticket of what you're doing? They're going to shut it down, but not by obvious means, by very clever means. They'll just shut the conversation down, or they'll start to say, "Oh, he's a big mouth, that Craig Johnston," or he's moonshot or a, what is he? He's a
Troublemaker.
not quite. They're not brave enough to say that because I'm not a troublemaker and they know it. I'm a truth seeker. I'm not a troublemaker. They see it as trouble because they see their mortgage at risk.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, you came to Football Australia. You had a meeting with James Johnston, didn't you?
I've had several.
How did they go?
Mate, let's talk about something positive because the moment
it didn't go well, did it?
The moment you start to personalise things, then you become the problem. I know I'm not the problem. I know I'm the solution to all the game's problems in this country. I know I am. But nobody's given me 5 minutes, apart from stealing ideas here and there, right, for their own bureaucratic needs. And I feel a bit aggravated by that. I was going to say offended. I hate that word, offended. No, I'll say it. I was a bit offended by that. So, mate, I've got so many other things now that I need to do before I die, right? Because just the way I think, that's why there's not enough hours in the day to do what I need to do. We're having a nice conversation, so let's keep it that way about the positives of Australian soccer. And I did give you a really interesting example of good thinking, different thinking, revolutionary thinking. And that was to bring Ange home and let's all get behind him, right? And how we can get a better standard of play. Number one, okay, the CEO job at FFA is open. If I was going to be the CEO and I wrote a CV, curriculum vitae, I'd say, number one, I'm going to promise, right, that in my role, I will bring the standard of Australian soccer up 4, 5, up to 10% in the next 4 years. Number two, I will bring these outrageous fees the parents are paying for registration, I will bring them down by 40%, 50%.
And with just staying with those prices, do you feel that because it costs so much to play, the sport is sort of becoming an elitist sport?
It's a problem in a world where money is being squeezed anyway out of everything. So it's only going to get worse unless there's a revolution. What I was getting to was the other thing was to bring the things with KPIs attached rather than fluff and marketing and sales and BS to appease the sponsors, and the media. To bring the Socceroos, 40% up the list. To bring the Matildas, right, to the best team in the world. I think our girls can win a World Cup. I said it 20 years ago. I said it 10 years ago. We should have won that World Cup. Why didn't we? You tell me.
Technical ability in the end, I think. I mean, we were, a home World Cup. We had the support. But I think what was lacking, and to a point where the Matildas have got to a point where they've had the same squad for a long, long time, there doesn't seem to be the people coming through underneath. The W League, the standard isn't that great. And even former players like Lisa Devanna has said stuff like that, the W League's got to get better. So it's almost like, to me, it's like that golden generation of the Socceroos. When they retired, no one's come through after it. I feel same thing, history repeating itself, but with women's football, with the Matildas, once these big name players, there's been some good ones coming through, like Mary Fowler's, etc. But I don't feel there's an undercurrent coming through to replace them, which is a real worry, in years to come.
Yeah, it should be a worry to everybody, and I'm glad you said it. So you become the problem, not me. I've learned this is the politics, the currency of behaviour. You see, so you don't actually say the truth, but you tease it out of other people because we're living in fundamentally a dishonest situation. So, do you want better performances from our soccer teams at all levels? Do you want a higher standard of entertainment from the world's largest sport in this country? Well, then we have to say, well, what's the revolution that can change all of that? What's the big ideas? Who are the big people with the big, bold visions and charisma? Who are these people, right? And how can we sit them down? And how can the Australian people get access to them rather than everything being cancelled because we've got to go through the gatekeepers?
But do you feel on a professional level, on the highest level, sport these days is entertainment? It's like people want to go and be entertained.
Of course it is.
But at the end of the day, it still is a results-driven sport, meaning you keep losing, like the Spurs thing. You keep losing, you're going to get unhappy people. They could be playing attractive, like the Ange way of that sort of system. But if you're not getting results, it's almost like you'd rather win a 1-0 game ugly.
Like the final itself.
Yeah.
That was an ugly game.
Has there ever been it hasn't been too many European Cup finals that have been great, really, have there?
Well, I can't remember an uglier one,
But at the end of the day, it's about lifting that trophy, isn't it?
Bingo. I agree.
At Elk Architecture, we don't just design buildings, we shape the spaces where life happens. From concept to construction, our award-winning architects bring our vision to life with precision, passion, and purpose. Whether it's your dream home or your next big commercial project, trust Elk Architecture to build what matters most. Elk Architecture, designed for life, built for the future. Are you pissed off with Adidas? I mean, you brought. I mean, they were close to falling over before you brought the Predator. You've made this boot. You've come to them. Same sort of thing. Knocked on the door. This is what I've got. Yeah. They've grabbed it and ran with it. And I'm sure you got paid well for it. You worked for them for a while in Germany. Royalties. What happened there? I mean, for the average person, you can still walk past. I'd like to know what you'd be thinking when you walk past a sports store and there's a Predator there. And you think, I made that baby and I've got no skin in that game anymore, in that.
I was at Rebel at Charlestown Mall yesterday and I did exactly what you just said. I picked up the latest iterations of it 30 years later. One part of me, you know what? This is when I should be crying now, and I'm not. I'm not because it's about money. I just think when it's about emotion, then that's why I struggle. But at the moment, I'm actually laughing. And Adidas took the patents, stole the patents from me. The patents. I owned the patents. Adidas never owned the Predator. I did. They did a licensing deal from me. I gave them a license to make the Predators, if you like, and then they were actually bankrupt and trading as insolvent when I first came to them, and they said, "No, it'll never work. Go away." They sent me away. But so did Puma, so did Umbro, so did Reebok. They all said, "No, it'll never work." You know, I guess you played for somebody, but see on that table there, they're all the prototypes that I'd made before Adidas and then after Adidas, while I was at Adidas. So just on the table. So the funny thing is, everybody knocked it back, and then I had to leave the main event and Palm Beach, where I was living, Whale Beach, where I was living, and go and live in Germany because they had no money and they couldn't pay me. So because it was a licensing deal, All those boots, they're all prototypes. I've literally, and in the background too there, I literally got thousands of prototypes, some of them pre-Adidas, because I worked on the Predator for 5 or 6 years before I even took it to them.
Yeah.
And I got the patents. So the story's not over, by the way. When you say, are you peed off with Adidas? You know, I think that's a funny couple of words, peed off. I think if you become that, you become antagonistic, and I'm not, because I'm the father of that shoe, right? And actually, I'll say that again, if you don't mind. I created that shoe, and I know it hasn't got at the moment. They recently did a 30-year anniversary on the Predator boot, a big documentary, and they were talking to Zidane and Beckham and Jude Bellingham and other players that play in it. And Zidane's just waxing lyrical about how that boot was made for him and how he was made for that boot, the one he scored the Champions League goal in the Champions League final, the volley, right? And he talks about it. And when I was listening to him, I said, I know what he's saying. I know what he's saying. Adidas don't know what he's saying. He said when the ball came down, he said, I knew I could strike it and that I wasn't going to miss by much. Because, again, there's a math, what part of foot on what part of ball. But the rubber in the boot and the fins and the jets, where the patents come from, they give the ball extra power, and they give the ball extra grip, right? And it's an enlarged sweet spot. So he basically said, I knew I wasn't going to miss by much, and it went straight in, from outside the penalty box, a volley, right? So he was talking about a previous generation of Predators. When I was there running the show, I ran the department. They can afford to pay me. I actually spent money on the marketing, right? Going around the world, getting players to play in it. I gave Beckham the boots, right? I had to go through Alex Ferguson first. Took me forever. But then I gave him the boots. That's when he scored from the halfway line against Crystal Palace. First time he wore them. So I signed Beckham to the Predator, and I signed all the other players.
But the thing that people say to me when we talk about the Predator and your name comes up, the first thing they say, how is it, hasn't he still got a percentage in it?
Yeah, because did we mention lawyers before? Hello? How do gatekeepers and bureaucry, and how does it work?
So,
See,
so
you
again,
know what we are?
Exactly the same thing.
You know what we are, mate? We're modern working class guys with working class ethos, and yes, we're in studios and all of that stuff, but we're working class. We don't write policy. We don't legalise policy. We don't enforce policy. And at every juncture, that's where we're getting beaten up and screwed. So the story about Adidas and the Predators is not over, and they know they did the wrong thing. They know it. And I'm going to offer them solutions rather than acrimony and, be a victim. I won't be a victim. I've got the next boot up my sleeve. It's all about the Internet of Things, and it's all about the sensors. It's all about the original concept that Zidane was talking about in the documentary. It's lost its soul. The Predator's lost its soul. That's why I went there yesterday. I was looking at it, feeling it. Go like this. I touch the rubber, and it's not rubber, it's silicone or something. It doesn't work.
Now, Craig, we'll swap tact we'll move away from the Predator because it just causes angst. We'll just go back to Spurs again, yet it's just with Ange. You had a bit of skin in that club for a while, obviously after you finished playing. Joe Lewis, who was the majority shareholder, you were in a relationship with his daughter, Vivian, for 18 years engaged?
Yes.
What's Joe Lewis like?
He's a very clever man, and I was there when they bought the club from Alan Sugar, and funnily enough, I knew his son Charlie, who was a big Liverpool fan. So I said, "Well, why don't you buy Liverpool instead?" So Charlie said, "What a good idea." So I took him up to Liverpool because at the time they were looking to buy a club in England because they had, and the company was called ENIC, English National Investment Company, and Joe was the owner of that, majority owner of that, and they bought 3 or 4 clubs in Europe. They bought Slavia Prague, they bought AEK Athens, they had Bordeaux, so they had some really elegant clubs, and they needed an English club. And at the time, there was 3 or 4 were available. Chelsea was available. Liverpool were in trouble because of Gillette and Hicks, the previous American owners.
That's right.
So I took Charlie up to Liverpool, and he sat with the directors, and they couldn't come to an agreement because it was the Americans that they had to deal with.
Yep.
So instead, then they bought the club off Alan Sugar, I think for about £29 million. And Alan Sugar was a very, very good businessman, and the club was an extraordinary financial health and order when they bought it. But I think he just wanted to get out because he had other things to do. So £29 million, now it's worth £2.5 billion at least. That was 25 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, yeah.
What part did you play? Did you have much of it?
None really in that deal happening.
I'm just talking about at the time when you were,
No, I wasn't working with ENIC at all. I had my own stuff, so I wasn't working. I just now and again, if they needed anything, I knew everybody. I remember once on the boat in the Thames, and Viv's dad. It was about the building of the Tottenham Stadium, and he really needed to get a meeting with the Prime Minister. And I don't think it was Boris Johnson. No, it wasn't. It was Cameron maybe before that. So I just heard him say, how do we get a meeting with the Prime Minister? How do we get a meeting with the Prime Minister? And nobody knew. I said, I'll get you a meeting with the Prime Minister. And the next day he was meeting with the Prime Minister.
Wow.
So little things like that, yeah.
That was an interesting time of your life though, wasn't it? You had 3 residences. You had London,
I didn't.
Florida.
I didn't. But
you lived in different places,
Yeah.
Bahamas.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been incredible.
It was.
Living in Florida, you were living near some pretty high-profile people as well, weren't you?
Yeah. It's interesting because I lived in Palm Beach, Whale Beach, that area, the insular peninsula, we used to call it, and it was a full-on surfing culture and community, full on. Everything was about the surf, the weather, Mother Nature. Kelly Slater was there at Avalon at the time, blah, 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 blah. Martin Potter was there, Tommy Carroll, they all lived there. Then when I went to Liverpool, you've got Dalgleish, well, home of the Beatles, hello, if you like your music, Jerry and the Pacemakers, You'll Never Walk Alone, all sorts of incredible bands, not to mention, Manchester, 26 miles away, the bands coming out of there. So you had this incredible football culture, and I feel very blessed because then when I moved to America, it was golf, nothing but golf. Mind you, again, I was living on a golf course, and it was a golf course owned by Viv's dad, and it's where of the world's top, let's say 30 golfers, 20 were living either at Lake Nona near the airport, Orlando Airport, or Isleworth, which was kind of the other side on Lake Windermere, just near where Disney and Universal Studios are. Lake Windermere, I mean, just spectacular. You know, when I said beautiful places in the world, one I'd put close to Newcastle and Lake Macquarie would be Windermere in Florida. And it's where Disney Studios and all the Disney executives, they all lived at the golf club as well, and the Universal executives. So one of the most exclusive golf clubs in all of America. And Tiger just happened to be one of the owners, if you like.
So you're on speaking terms with Tiger mainly?
Yeah. Speaking terms with all of them, And the funny thing is on the aftermath of the Adidas, I don't know how to explain it.
Atrocity.
So I won't. Encroachment, shall we say?
and part two's coming.
Yeah,
anyway.
part two's coming. Don't you worry, mate. Get your lawyers ready. Yeah. Apart from that, I figured out in a hurry. I was unemployable. I didn't have any school records. I left school when I was 15. So I had to make a living. What I noticed about Joe and his family and Vivian, they had a lot of businesses in a lot of areas, but they had no real sort of marketing and sales, right? And I told you I'm a creative, so my key thing in life has always been photography and video and what's next. So I thought, well, how I can contribute to being part of the family and the business is do all the photography. Then I wasn't involved in the politics of the business or anything like that. I wanted to disassociate myself.
Did Joe ever ask you to come on board in that sense?
All the time. All the time he'd ask me to take photos of this one or that one or friends or family or this business or that business. And I was always willing because it was always fun and it was always jetting all over the world. And, it was a billionaire lifestyle. It wasn't a millionaire lifestyle. It was a billionaire
He's
lifestyle.
Worth, 6.5 billion?
Yeah. Well, it goes up and down, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I was, I was with him the day when he lost $1.5 billion on the stock market, the Goldman Sachs crash. I was with him that day, so that was hard to take. How was his reaction to that? He went red. He went red, and anyway, he's managed to get out of that. As I said, he's a very clever man, and generous man, a nice man. And so I learned an awful lot about photography, and I ended up being the official photographer for a lot of their sports events, especially the golf. They had real estate, so I was the core photographer for all the real estate, all the brochures, all the marketing. Whenever there was a function at any of the golf courses, and they own 3 golf courses, one the Bahamas, as you said, and the co-owners of that were Ernie Els and Tiger Woods. So that whole thing, I watched it come out of the ground. I photographed it coming out of the ground. Now it's where the Tiger Hero Challenge is every year in the Bahamas. So yeah, it was a fascinating 20 years.
Do you talk about this much? Oh, you don't.
Never.
To me, that's the one thing, because I know you so well now, but you never bring it up, and I don't bring it up just through respect. But to me, it's a really interesting time, and might, I didn't want to maybe get you upset because it's, obviously, you're not with Vivian now, but at that time you're meeting so many incredible people, big names, living that lifestyle. Do you look back and cherish those moments?
Yeah. That's what I tried to explain to you. It was another culture shift, culture shock, because it was a billionaire lifestyle. And one moment you'd be in Saint-Tropez on one of the boats, and then alongside of you, old Kerry Packer would pull up Arctic, his boat. Then everybody would go on there for a game of cards, and then go back to Joe's boat for dinner. And
wow.
Kerry, several times, had several sort of conversations and beers with him, and he asked me to take photographs specifically, of him. I can't find them, but, so things like that happened. And what Kerry would do, and Joe, both the boats would go around the Mediterranean during the summer, and they'd play cards, and they'd get all sorts of rich and wealthy and
there's high stakes there, I bet.
Absolutely. Salubrious people on board, right? And then they would go around, and at the end of the summer, right, there'd been so many games of cards, and these guys are clever, financially, mathematically. So you think about the expense and the cost of the two outrageous vessels sailing around the Mediterranean. At the end of it, they'd won that many games of cards, doing the trip paid for itself. I thought it was genius. And they really liked and respected each other.
Yeah.
And there's quite an interesting thing when we were docked at New York Harbour once, and James Packer came on board, and James had recommended a property in Argentina to Joe, and Joe bought it straight away. It's the most amazing property you've ever seen in your life. It's like the size of a small country with alpine snow, and then lakes, then rivers. And,
so Joe just bought it off the recommendation, didn't?
Very much.
Wow.
Because Kerry had been there because of polo and the Argentine horses and the culture. Yeah. He'd been there for a long time. He knew it inside out. Anyway, long story short, James actually told us a story on the boat in New York Harbour. And he got quite emotional about it, and had tears in his eyes. And he said that his father had said to him when he was really ill and not much left in him, he said, "I want you to look after Joe Lewis." And James said, "Why?" "Okay, Dad, why?" And he said, "Because he will look after you." And it was very powerful when he said it. And there was a lot of love between the two guys. In fact, Kerry looked up to Joe. He considered him a mentor. Yeah. Now, Kerry Packer would do that to very few people.
Absolutely. There's so many stories. And I mean, you would have known Kerry from your Wide World of Sports days as well. There was a good story because when I was at Channel 10, I used to work with a lot of ex-Channel 9 people, and the amount of Kerry Packer stories that used to come out, good and bad, let's face it, But there was a good one, I think when television started in the 60s in Australia, there was a cameraman that was at Channel 9 for all those years, and I think it was about the mid-'80s to late 80s he retired, decided to stop, and but had never ran into Kerry Packer in all that time. His last day, he went to back then they used to have you get your check, this was your retirement, this is your, leaving the building. And he's walking down the corridor and Kerry Packer's coming towards him. He went, "Wow, Kerry, I've never met him, this is my last day." So he stopped Kerry, he said, "Oh, Mr. Packer, I'd just like to say it's been an honour and a privilege to work for Channel 9 for all these years. I want to thank you. I'm retiring today." And Kerry was like, he's like, what do you got in your hand? He says, oh, this is my check, Give me a look at that. He looked at it. He looked at him and went, whoosh. And this guy went, oh, my God. So then Kerry whipped out his checkbook and put an extra $100,000 on it.
There you go.
And said,
have
a good life, son.
There you go.
And these are the sort of things you don't hear,
Yeah. And all of it true. The situation was that I was actually Vivian's partner, or as they say in America, the significant other, or as I used to say, the insignificant other, because Viv ran the golf course. She was the boss, right? So I was just a bloke that was Viv's new partner, if you like.
Yeah.
So, and I liked it that way. And I was known as the photographer guy, and Tiger would always call me this photographer guy, and I got no desire to bigwig myself and say, do you know who you're talking to?
Yeah.
I mean, just the concept of that leaves me cold. Mind you, I'd say to Viv. Anyway. So one of the funniest thing is that for 6, 7, 8 years, there was a big tournament called the Tavistock Cup. Look, I just happened to have a shirt, Tavistock Cup, which was Lake Nona versus Isleworth for Viv's dad's holding company called Tavistock. So everybody just knew me as a photographer. Great. And Viv's insignificant other. So but I'm always working. I like my butt off, because if people are coming, it's an event. I've got cameras, I've got lights, I've got audio. I'm filming it because it's got to go out to the marketing department. So I'm not hobnobbing it and smoke salmon and caviar. Well, I will, but I'll just go and I'll be off. Anyway. So.
You had some lunch
for years. I had a really good relationship with Tiger, and partly through his ex-missus Elin, right? Who one day I was photographing all the kids in this space, all the golfers' kids, particularly playing soccer, but I'd never photographed Tiger's kids. So one day I was just walking away, and Elin said, "Look, Craig," she said, why aren't you photographing my kids? I'm feeling you live. I said, well, it's just a policy. It was not a good idea because of. And she said, I'd really like you to photograph the kids, and so would Tigers. Not a problem. So then from then on, I always photographed them when I was photographing the other kids, and so my relationship with Tiger was good because I played sport, and I know the pressures, and I used to see it with people like Kenny Dalglish and say Ian Rush and people at the height of their Souness, at the height of their careers, how overwhelming it was. So I would completely stay out of the way, but I was always there, for a good snap and a good moment and a good what have you. But then we played. They played a charity golf event every couple of years over in Ireland, and it was J.P. McManus, a very famous Irish entrepreneur, and he would spend a fortune to get every golfer in the world. So now we're at Adair Manor in Ireland, and the pro celebrities the next day. Anyway, somebody pulled out or got injured or something, so there was a celebrity spot. So JP, who I know really well, JP owned Manchester United at the time, just so you know.
Okay.
This is the circle you're travelling. Yep. And JP came round to me, he said, look, he said, Craig, he said, celebrity hasn't arrived, but can't do it. Can you fill in? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. What do you want me to do? He said, I want you to play golf with some. I think Sevi Ballesteros or something, or Sevi and a celebrity, right? So sure. So anyway, so I did, and so now I'm on the warm up thing in the morning, and I can't play very well. I play, but, as a sportsman, I put it together. So I'm like, now I've got a uniform and I got my name on the back, Johnston, like that. So anyway, I'm hitting them pretty good, in the warm up. Right, and I hear some footsteps coming, people murmuring by me. I wonder who that is. Turn around, and it's Tiger. And he said, "What's the photographer guy doing warming up?" And all the caddies, right? And see, there's a lot of Scots and Irish caddies and English caddies, and they completely know who they're all Man United, Liverpool fans. All the caddies, they completely know who Craig Johnston is. Yeah, right. But they're all English, Irish, Scottish. Yeah. Right, and they're saying, oh, he's got a good swing on him, it's 220 yards there, So Tiger announces, what's the photographer guy doing warming up? I can't do Tiger's accent. And these guys they're bent up with laughter, and they said, don't you know who that is? Said, yeah, I know, it's Vivian's partner, the photographer guy. And they're laughing, and they're saying, Tiger, are you stupid? And Tiger says, no, man, I'm not. Do you know anything about soccer? He said, yeah. And they said, do you know Liverpool? He said, yeah, I love Liverpool. Said, he used to play for Liverpool. Tiger said, no, he didn't. He's Vivian's boyfriend.
So that's how the penny dropped.
That's how the penny dropped. And he went as red as Tiger can go. He went bright red. He said, you're kidding.
But also, he probably thought too that what a guy you are. Like you mentioned, you're not one of those big noters.
Yeah.
That you could have said that to him in the past. Yeah. But you found out that way.
Exactly, which is why it was funny, and which is why he liked me even more, which you've tapped into. Yeah. So he would go out of his way to do things on the course that he knew I'd like to photograph. So anyway, so long story short, good on him. Hey, very quickly, another quick story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I was playing golf at Isleworth with Payne Stewart's son, Aaron Stewart, and Nick O'Hearn. You know Nick O'Hearn, the Australian golfer?
Yes.
I was playing with them, and I'm just about to putt a helicopter. Right? What's that? Now, the week before this, there'd been a murder on Isleworth, and someone had shot his wife in the head. I think it was pretty horrible. Yeah. So we'd had all the press at Isleworth, trying to get in. A helicopter, so a bit distracting, trying to putt. 2 helicopters. What's going on? 3 helicopters. I'm like, what the devil? We're all saying, what the devil's going on here? And given the murder a couple of weeks before, the week before, right, they said, oh, this must be really serious. They said, phone Viv, find out what's going on. So I phoned Viv. I said, look, Viv, there's 3 helicopters. She said, well, I'm not there. She said, but I know it is. I can't tell you. I said, what? She said, I can't tell you what's happened. So anyway, so said to the boys, she can't tell me. I said, it must be something really, really, really wrong. So what had happened is Tiger's accident, when his wife had found out about the affairs, and she's hit the car with Tiger in it, and that's why he's had to go to hospital. Okay. And that's what it was. So next thing you know, right, we've finished our game and we're trying to ask questions why all these helicopters. But as you drive out the front, we live there on the course. But I had to do some grocery shopping or something. There was like media everywhere, right down the road. What's going on? Yeah. And that's what it was. Wow. It was the world's media wanted to know about what's gone on with Tiger. Wow. And it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, as you probably remember. Yeah. Well, we were living there, not on the same street as Tiger, but 2 streets down. We're on Payne Stewart Drive and he's on the main drive. Yeah. Anyway.
It's just an incredible, some of these stories. I mean, these are stories that you've never spoken about, but probably a time you haven't spoken about, and you mentioned that. But was it, when it finished, was that hard? I mean, a relationship breakup is hard, there's no doubt. But I mean, you've stepped away from that lifestyle. How was that?
There was an intermediary, and what it was, I don't know whether you can see that, and all down there, but I had melanoma. The doctor said there's 3 types of skin cancer: squamous cell, basal cell, carcinoma, and melanoma. And you've had all 3, or you've got all 3, and it's in your nervous system. And we have to hit it with a hammer, like out of the blue.
Yeah.
So then I spent a long time with small little operations. I say long time, 3 or 4 years. But then they said, no, it's spreading everywhere because it's in your nervous system.
Yeah.
So then I had to have major operations, major surgery. It was a real mess. They did a remarkable job to do what they've done with it. But
that was in America?
It was in America. Yeah. So the surgeon actually said to me, she said, I guess you're around about 60 years old, 55. I said, yeah. She said, I bet you're from the north coast of New South Wales. I said, yes. She said, I bet you were a sportsman. And I said, yes. I thought she'd looked up on Google. I said, how do you know that? She said, well, it's the melanoma capital of the world. Mm-hmm. She said, the statistics all say that. She said, so I know what this is, and we're going to have to hit it with a hammer. She said, so it was a dreadful experience, and I really struggled with it and the drugs that went along with it. Yeah. And I actually never really fell out with Viv or split up with her. I just had this burning desire to get home. I just had this burning desire because I'd been overseas most of my life, and I wanted to get home and realise the dreams when I was a kid of getting back home and coaching back home, basically.
Did she ever know that when in the relationship, that you always wanted to do that?
Yeah. No, it was very civil, and we were engaged to be married.
Yeah.
So it was all very civil and still is. Yeah. And Viv gets on really well with Jenny, my ex-wife, and 4 girls. She's like the 5th girl almost, Viv, and she's just marvellous. And in the end of the day, Jenny's met a beautiful man as well, and they have a great life.
That's lovely.
So,
and how are the girls? Like your 4 girls, you speak to them regularly?
Yeah.
Whereabouts are they? Are they in Australia or overseas?
One's in Cardiff, 2 are in Sydney, one's overseas in between Switzerland and England. Yeah. So no, and Viv, Chelsea, my eldest, recently got married, and the first invite was Viv, so she came across for the wedding, and it's just magic that we all get on, and there was no split up as such. Yeah. It was. This had a real profound effect on me. Yeah. And I thought, I've spent my life travelling the world, and I just want to get back home and get back, because I always dreamed of getting back home and coaching kids somewhere between here and Byron Bay. Yeah. That was always my and living on a caravan on the beach was always my dream. Yeah. Living on a caravan. But well, funnily enough, I'm at Newcastle Beach in a really small apartment, so it's like a caravan. Yeah. I've just got running water. Thanks for laughing, by the way. He's good, isn't he?
I was going to say, Dave, there's a picture, I think, of Craig's eldest daughter, Chelsea, that he took a picture of, It was in the Walk Alone book when she was in the European Cup.
Yes.
It's a beautiful...
There you
look
go.
at that.
There's Chelsea. There you go. And see, that's when we won the European Cup in Rome. So I had a studio in the house. So I took the cup home, and you know they weren't happy. And I said, look, long story short, because her name was Chelsea. The headline they used in the paper was "Chelsea's in the European Cup," and that's about the only time they ever were. You know, well, they were back in the day.
Because you nearly signed for Chelsea too, didn't you?
I did. Another story.
But also one I want to sort of get to is that another club that wanted your services was Nottingham Forest.
That's
right.
right.
Had a very iconic manager, Brian Clough.
That's right.
This interview here blows me away. So this was when Don Revie and Brian was on the BBC.
Yes.
This is after after 44 days of coaching Leeds, he was sacked. And on that same night, he was on the BBC with Don Revie, who was the former Leeds coach who'd become the England manager, and both didn't like each other. And it was just the best interview. It was live. It was just, I was just sort of thinking how it would have been. So many people were watching. It was almost like they were at each other politely, but you could just tell. Can we get the...
Don Revie, the England manager. But Brian Clough, first of all. Brian, what's your reaction to being booted out in this fashion?
Oh, it's a very sad reaction. Obviously, to be sacked, as you profoundly put it, and the only way you could put it, is a very sad one. Very sad one for me personally, and I also believe a very sad one from Leeds Football Club's angle and from the Leeds City.
Do you feel that you were given a chance in the job?
Well, 7 weeks is hardly a long time to be given a chance in any job. I would hope that Mr. Revie would get a lot longer time in his job.
Well, you began with very high hopes. We talked on a programme here only a few weeks back. When did you first realise that it wasn't going to work out?
Oh, I didn't realise it at all. I was always convinced, right up until tonight, that it was going to work out. It was inevitable. To replace the best manager on record, or by record, in the Football League, then obviously Leeds had to get somebody that was, you know, slightly special. I don't want to be blasé conceited, but I'm not sure who they could have got to improved on his record.
You were the best man for the job, you thought?
I believed I was, and obviously the Leeds board did.
Well, why didn't it work out? What was the main single thing that went wrong?
Results. In 7 weeks, you know, there is not a lot of time to become established. When you've taken over a job of a man that's been there 10, 15 years, and he's been regarded as the kingpin, as the father figure, as the man that made everything tick, then within 7 weeks it is impossible, utterly impossible, to replace that type of thing. If the results had gone a bit better, then obviously it would have been easier. But due to circumstances, due to the fact there were inherited suspensions and little Billy was sent off and banned for a long time, and Paul Madeley's injury and that type of thing, you know, the results weren't as good as should have been.
OK, well, let's turn to Don Revie. Do you consider that it was in fact possible to step into your shoes, to replace you?
Being very, very honest, I think it was a very difficult job for anybody to do. But I do feel that the players at Leeds United that won the championship last year to possibly go on and do things this year.
Well, was Brian Clough the man that you would have picked to succeed you?
Austin, don't start jumping the gun. You ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. I think the players were there to do the job. Now, whether after 6 matches they're going to be judged on 6 matches, I don't know. But all I can say is that I was with these players, most of them, for 10, 11 years. I was manager for 13 and a half, and I basically think that they're good enough to win a trophy this season. Last season, we had an awful lot of injuries and suspensions, and we played without 4 and 5 and 6 players right from the very first match. I knew the players. Clough, as he calls me, Revie, didn't know them. And I knew how to handle them and how to juggle them about, and he didn't have time to do that. But the players are there, and they're dedicated professionals, and I had no trouble with them for 13 and a half years.
Well, in saying that the team was good enough. You're making an implied criticism of Brian Clough. Do you think Brian Clough was the man for the job?
That is entirely Leeds United's director's opinion.
What's your personal opinion?
My personal opinion, as I stated at the time, before Brian took the job, I won't call him Clough because I wouldn't take him down like that, because I think it's a sad night for anybody to get the sack as a manager in any football, in any job. Nobody likes to see this happening in football at all. I openly stated, before anybody took the job, when I took the England job, that I felt that Johnny Giles was the man for the job.
Now, that was live television. That was... everyone would have been glued to that. Clough was a very says it how it is sort of person. He already had some skin in the media game in regards to being on Michael Parkinson nearly every second or third week. You had an experience with him as well when he tried to sign you for Nottingham Forest. Was that the same Brian Clough as the one you remember?
Yeah. It's just so interesting looking at gentlemen that don't like each other on live television back then.
No filter.
Well, I think there was a lot of filters actually. Just the opposite, Michael, and the way he originally called him Clough because he'd called him Reevy, but then he took that back and said, "I'm above that." He said, "I won't call you Clough." I thought that was quite beautiful, because nowadays on a podcast you get people screaming at each other and look at Piers Morgan. Yeah. You know, so you compare that with Piers Morgan, the Israeli Hamas, and some of the language and it's really ugly. But they both handled it with aplomb, and I think we've lost a lot of that. It's discipline and behaviour that we've lost.
It was like a gentleman's fight.
It was, and so at that level, that's interesting.
Because people say that, I mean, that was the early Clough.
Yeah,
he was very charismatic, very quick, and sadly, he got on the booze, and it was a totally different Clough back in the later times, and you could see it. He sort of shied away from the media, and probably was a bit short in regards to his anger with players and media in the later years. Yeah, what were your experience with him?
Well, funnily enough, he was from Middlesbrough.
Yeah,
which was really interesting in the scheme of things, because I'm a maverick. I mean, he was a total maverick in his day, but intellectually, he was a good player, he was a centre forward and all of that stuff. And he retired early because of injury.
That's right.
But it was his brain and the way he thought. So just listening to that, 100%, I know what Don Reevy was saying there. Yep. Is you've got this hooray Henry with his squeaky voice coming in telling people how good he is, versus the old-fashioned Don Revy, here's how we're doing it, lads, or, typical Yorkshire. And you can see that because I'll bring Angie into the conversation, and I'll bring Jurgen Klopp into the conversation, because what happens in that 90 minutes of football on a 3 o'clock Saturday afternoon in England is the build-up during the week, and the players and how the players feel about themselves and their manager and their teammates and their lives. It's a feeling. You've got to understand that if you go back to the stripping out the core things, you've got 11 players versus 11 players. And if for some reason this team has got more confidence on that day, and maybe it's because they're playing at home, right? Maybe it's because they've played six-a-side all week and they've had a great time. Maybe it's because a new manager's come in. Oh, I've got to show off to the boss. What's show off mean? Try harder, right? Yeah. This is the politics of the dressing room, the currency of behaviour as a result of that. So you've got a hooray Henry with a squeaky voice that's full of himself, and you could see it there. He's young, and he was good.
Yeah.
But when you come into a dressing room telling everyone you're good, and they're seasoned old Leeds United players that have played for England, won the World Cup for England, said some of the names, Paul Madeley and stuff like that. He lost the dressing room. Easy. That's what happened.
So the same thing would have happened if Clough had came into your dressing room at Liverpool, at Anfield, and acted like
perhaps that. You never know. It depends on the players, of course. And see, if you've got one or two, cleverer people in the dressing room, it could be different if you've just got some, a bunch of, like hooligans in your dressing room. For want of a better word, I can't find a word. But, the whole thing about rotten apples and rotten eggs, they can infect a whole dressing room really quickly. Tottenham Hotspurs, right? A remarkable thing happened over at Chelsea 10, 12, 15 years ago. And that is Mourinho was in charge of Chelsea, and a female referee ran on and did something that was quite upsetting to Mourinho. So he roasted this female assistant, roasted her live on the game. And everybody kind of saw it and thought it was completely out of order, but especially John Terry and Frank Lampard. Now, immediately the next game, Chelsea lost the next game. Then they lost the game after and the game up, blah, 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 like that. So bottom line is Mourinho had lost the dressing room, completely lost the dressing room. How do we know? Because they told us and the media told us. What did Tottenham do the next day, the next week? He's just lost the dressing room. They go and get him for Tottenham. So the point being, you can see it in Don Reevy's eyes and his knowledge. And Cloughie at that stage in his life was just too big for his boots. There's a lovely way of putting it. Too big for his boots. And the players react to that. And the performance comes from their like or dislike of the manager and the manager's like for himself. Do you get it? And if you're a humble bloke, like Bob Paisley was, totally humble, the players love you because you're humble, right? Ange has got a bit of that about him. They love him, and they said they didn't want him to leave, but they hadn't performed the way they should have, right? So it's interesting. That's how it works.
Yeah. Do you believe that, especially just with Bob Paisley, before a game, you know the team you had, it was a team of superstars. Did he have to say much before a game?
He didn't, and another word is because he couldn't. He couldn't because his vocabulary wasn't that wide, but it didn't need to be because I said he was a humble man, right? And he'd learnt an awful lot from Bill Shankly. Yeah. See, he was part of that backroom thing, as was Moran and others. So Bob Paisley was a Geordie. And he was a man of very, very few words. And when I say that, I mean very, very few words. But if he was upset, he would sort of stutter and go in his Geordie accent, but, man, I told you, just tackle him, like that. So that's all he could say. But he'd go bright red. You knew he was upset. You knew it was wrong. Fix your tackle. Yeah. At the same time, this is what I found fascinating. The backbone of that team when I first got there, from the back, was Hansen, one of the greatest centre-halves ever, Souness in midfield, Dalglish up front. So the backbone of your team is probably, I call them the holy trinity of Scottish football, and perhaps the most professional, as a group, outfit that ever existed in British football history. Paisley was presiding over them, right? And I'll tell you a famous story because it then gives you the answer you need, and it colourises the points I've just been trying to make about Clough and Paisley and others, answering your question. And that is, there's another manager called Harry Redknapp. And he went to watch a game in London, and Liverpool were playing Queen's Park Rangers in London. And Harry Redknapp wasn't employed at the time, and he got a ticket into the box. And apparently at the game, Joe Fagan was the manager, and Joe Fagan was sitting in the box, and sitting next to him was an old friend of his that was from London that he met up with, and he was in the army with him or something like that. So best of friends. So Harry Redknapp was sitting behind them and noticed that Joe Fagan, Liverpool are playing, and I think we won the game. I might have been playing as well at the time, right? And in the players' lounge afterwards, Harry, who was a little bit younger at the time, and his career was coming on well, management career.
Yeah.
He went up to Joe Fagan and he said, Joe, good victory, all of that stuff. He said, I just want to ask you a question. He said, you're the manager of the club. You're not sitting in the box with Ronnie Moran and Roy Evans and those guys. He said, I just want to know, right, how can you manage the team when, because most of the game you're talking to your friend, and Fagan turned to him and said, well, if you have players like Dalglish, Souness and Hansen and a couple of the others he mentioned, he said they pretty much look after themselves, which is another way of looking at the whole thing that says it's not what you think it is or the media says it is or coaches say it is. If you've lived the game and loved the game, you know it's about how the individual players feel themselves as a player, but then their reaction with the other players. And then if the management, it's not just a manager, the management is treating them right as individuals and as a group. So if there's some unfairness, then that's when the rotten eggs start to form, or the bad apples, whatever you call it. So you've got to have harmony in your dressing room. Now, Clough, on his form, there was no one better.
Yeah.
But on an interview like that, when you see a smarmy, condescending smartass, right, you just go, oh no, that would rub old Leeds players up that have won a lot and probably, as I said, World Cups, that rub them up the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah. And what you just mentioned too, in regards to Fagan and you got the Souness in the middle of the park and Dalglish up front, very similar to Manchester United, wasn't it? When they were at their height in the 90s with Sir Alex. Roy Keane was the general, like a Souness, and it was almost like, unless things are going really wrong, I'm going to have to say something. Yeah. But they sorted out for themselves, with a bit of finesse if needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and finesse is a good word when it's needed. But how about I'll throw this soccer boot at you and hit you in the head, right? No, it happened. Because it probably needed to happen. Yeah. Because the players became the clever dicks and the smart asses. Oh, I'm above Fergie's laws of discipline here. Yeah. And it's really interesting about Ferguson. And I've said it a couple of times as well. And I talked about, remember the white suit cup final?
Yes.
Okay, explain the white suit cup final.
So Liverpool were playing Manchester United in the FA Cup final at Wembley, and Liverpool turned up, the players all turned up in white suits and then walked on the pitch. It was, I don't know, it looked skylarking, like, look at me. I don't know whether the players wanted to do that. I mean, they didn't have to put them on, but all the players had white suits on, which looked, I don't know, ridiculous.
Oh, okay. Ridiculous, yeah. Well, if you think about the overtones of that in terms of the management, and Roy Evans was the manager at the time.
Yeah.
But who was the manager of Man United?
That would have been Sir Alex.
Hello, what did he say about the white suits
I actually
to
don't
his
remember
players? Well, nobody does, but he'd have been licking his lips because this is a tough game. You know, it's like rugby league. They're tough games, mate. These are tough people. If you do something that's smarmy and condescending,
Yeah.
have you ever worn a white suit?
No, I don't think it'd be flattering. Flattering for
Yeah.
me. White's never flattering, isn't it? That's why you wear black.
Well, why wear it at a cup final?
Yeah. I suppose it was just like
Why?
they were walking off the red carpet, wasn't it? Somewhere, and
Well, but they hadn't won the game. Hey, wait till you've won the game against Man United and Fergie and wear the white suits on the night out. Don't wear them to Wembley to walk around and. Maybe it's me. Maybe
No,
it's
no,
me.
I
But
don't-
I'm trying to tell you how
Yeah.
a dressing room operates.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about it is that I get asked by a lot of businesses to do kind of motivational speeches, and I talk about the culture of the dressing room. And the fascinating thing is it is a culture, right? And there's characters and personalities that are exactly the same in every dressing room. There's always a hard man centre half.
Yeah.
There's always who's a big, tough, uncompromising Don Revy type of bloke. There's always a Brian Clough, little spicy forward that's popping up everywhere and waving to the fans. Right? There's always you said Souness or Roy Keane.
Yep.
Just a hard, ugly, fearsome
Yep.
warrior in midfield, right? And we're saying,
Yeah.
that exists. But also those characters exist in business and in corporations. And in all teams, you have a similar look at things. It's why some businesses are successful and some are bound to fail.
Yeah.
And your leader's message is the most important thing. Would you take a bullet for this man or woman? Okay, if not so extreme, would you give your best? Or are you just there to make sure you get the mortgage,
Yeah.
right? And you'll shaft that person as soon as look at them because they're not respecting you. It's all interlinked, you see. And what I love about sport is because it's live and you have to produce the goods now, not in a year's time on a budget. You got to do it. It's honest. It's honest. It's why we all love sport. But business, you can hide, you can fudge, you can be dishonest, you can be sneaky, you can be a liar. You start to see that in a dressing room. This is why sport is so incredibly important for our kids and our communities, because you learn those lessons of what to do, but what not to do also. You try them out, and they soon get cut down by who? The rest of your teammates, your coach, your teachers, your parents. That's why it's a wonderful thing. So a lot of people see a lot of coaching mystique. It's rubbish. It's rubbish. It's rubbish. I'll tell you it's rubbish. And it's just this incredible business of gatekeeping that you talk about.
Yeah.
So I love that, by the way. That's my walk down memory lane, just there.
Yeah. So getting back to the question, we've gone into tangents, great tangents, by the way. But Cloughie tried to sign you, didn't he, at Forest? And you said no.
Well, it's a little bit more complex than that. I guess I was 20 years old and at Middlesbrough, and I guess they must have needed the money because next thing I know, I'm for sale. And there was 9 teams that had come in to try and buy me, including Tottenham, Manchester United, Aston Villa was right up there in the league, Chelsea. So the names went on, Arsenal, the names went on and on. and Liverpool and Forest. And that was the headline in the newspaper, you know. So 20 years old, it's a bit of a wow, you know, from 15 and Jack Charlton. So then I got a phone call and I thought it was somebody taking the mickey because it was Brian Clough's accent. Is that Craig Johnston? You know, and I said, well, yeah, who's that? You know, thinking it's somebody taking the mickey, you know, from the club.
Yeah.
He said, it's Brian Clough. And I said, yeah, right. He said, no, it's Brian Clough, lad. He said, I'm in Mallorca. I said, bollocks. He said, I am, lad. I'm in Mallorca. She's in Spain. And I said, all right, what do you want? He said, I want you to play for me. I said, look, stop taking the mickey, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, I remember Jenny, my ex-wife at the time, in the background going, what? I don't know. Says he's Brian Clough. So he said, I'm here with Peter Taylor. I'm just going to tell you, whatever you do, he said, because I'm over here, he said, I would sign you straight away. He said, but I'm not here. We're having a quick break. I'm here with Peter. Whatever you do, I'll be back next week, and I'm going to make you our key player. I want to lead the team with you, make you captain, give you whatever money you want. And I'm thinking, hang on a sec, this interpreter, whoever's pretending to be Brian Clough, he sounded mighty good to me. And I'm thinking,
he's selling a gun.
He said he was Brian Clough. He's phoning from Mallorca in Spain, you know. I said, I think it was him, you know. And he sounded a bit cross and a bit angry, you know. So like that. So Jenny said, oh, all right, whatever, you know. So back to whatever I was doing. The phone rings. Geordie accent. Hello, this is Bob Pearsley. I said, oh. Now you are taking the piss. Why no, man, I'm not taking the piss. Sorry about my accent. I'm just remembering the day, you know. And I said, oh really? And he said, yeah. He said, I really like the way you play. He said, you've got enthusiasm, you've got commitment. And it was so Bob Paisley-esque. There was no fluff. And then he did a bit of the Barbie stopper for me. And he said, and from an insider's perspective, he said, one of your biggest fans is here at the club, right? And I knew he meant Graham Souness straight away. Yeah. And I went, wow. So I kind of thought, hang on, that was Bob Paisley, that was Brian Clough. And I really didn't know what to do because at the time Liverpool aren't the huge global success they are now. And Clough and Forest were doing a remarkable thing. They were the Leicester of their day. Yep. But they did it with European Champions League cups, and they did it with the league and all of that stuff. So I phoned Dad, and he said, Reggie, how are you? I said, Dad, I got a problem. And he said, problem? What's wrong, son? I said, I've just had two bizarre phone calls, one with Brian Clough and one with Bob Paisley. I said, no, I really don't know what to do. I said, what do you think? And Dad's was a council worker and a mechanic, right? And he said, Brian Clough is a man. He said, and he's a clever man. He said, but Liverpool's an institution. He said, if I was you, I'd go with Liverpool. And I said, oh, thanks, Dad. That's really helped. And it did. It did. So I signed for Liverpool. I had to drive down to Liverpool.
Meanwhile, Clough is still in Mallorca.
Yeah. So So then I, in the euphoria of it, and I was injured anyway, so I wasn't about to play for Liverpool, but it was the end of the season as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, there's a couple of really interesting stories in the meanwhile. Like, for example, when it was announced, I was announced live on television, and live television was a new thing then. People hadn't seen it before, so it was a bit of a, wow, live television, Craig Johnston at Aintree, because the Grand National race was on, the annual Grand National. Right. So Liverpool's new signing, most expensive player in football history, Craig Johnston, live from Aintree. So anyway, because I'm on live television,
I know what you're going to say.
There's people back in Middlesbrough saying, oh, what a traitor, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So they went and burgled my house. while I was, and nobody had thought of that at the time. Well, he's obviously not here. We know where he's lives. He's just left us. Let's go and steal all of his stuff anyway. Yeah. So that's a little side issue there. Wasn't funny at the time when I got home. But then the first time that Forest came to Anfield after I signed for Liverpool, we were going that way, and the box was here. So the Kop end is over there, and Liverpool are going, Forest are going that way. Yep. So every time I got the ball here, Brian Clough would jump up and he'd say, "You're a cheat. You're a expletive cheat. You're a cheat. You're a expletive." And he would run up and down. So he did this 3 or 4 times. It was embarrassing. So he was really, really upset, right, that I didn't sign for him. I signed for Liverpool. And then after a while, Ronnie Moran, who was one of the key guys in backroom staff, he'd had enough. So he got up and he started chasing Clough, saying, "Sit down, you drunkard, you scallywag. Sit down," He said, "He's a lot of things, but he's not a cheat," So they were having this shouting match every time I got the ball. Second story, the first time we played Forest away at their ground, after the game was over, we're all in. All the lads were in the players' lounge, where you have a beer or two or a snack. Maybe meet people there, and then you get on the bus. Anyway, so I'm a little bit late. I'm one of the last ones to get there because I had a little bit of knee injury or something. So anyway, I got there late, and there was two bouncers on the thing. Said, "You can't come in to the players' lounge." I said, "What?" They said, "You can't come in." And I said, "Why? It's the players' lounge. I'm a player." Right? And they said, "No, on Mr. Clough's orders." So I've gone, oh my goodness. So I went back to the dressing room, and Ronnie Moran, Roy Evans, Bob Paisley, Joe Fagan, they were all there. And they said, "What are you doing back?" And I said, "Well," they said I couldn't go in the dressing room. I said, "Why?" I said, "Because Cloughie said I couldn't." And Ronnie Moran said, "Right, that's it, right." So he and Joe Fagan marched up to the players' room and said, "Everybody out right now. Drop your beer, out. Get on the bus." That was it.
Yeah. He held a grudge, didn't he, Cloughie? And you know what? When you're saying this, I can now understand why, because he was a very loyal sort of a person. And Mark Crossley, the former goalkeeper for Forest, famously tells this on the speaking circuit now. He's making a lot of money telling Cloughie stories, but one of them is the fact that Cloughie said to him, "Do you want a new contract?" And he said, yeah, we'll come to my office tomorrow. And Mark got there, and Cloughie pulls out a piece of paper contract. "Now sign this." And he looked at it, he said, I can't sign this. "Why not?" "Because there's nothing on it. It's a blank contract. Sign this or you're not playing." So I signed it. I didn't know. He goes, "Sign this and I'll fill it out the rest later." Yeah. So he was sort of saying to him, you trust me, sign this.
No, absolutely.
And so
Yeah,
to me, I can resonate in what you're saying is that he felt, you saying no to him was probably a real.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And see, I found it hard to believe that Brian Clough was phoning me. It's just the situation I was in. That 5 years in the Middlesbrough, 3 of in the Middlesbrough car park, and my ascent from not being picked in the Lake Macquarie rep team, not being good enough, to now the most expensive player in the world.
A tug of war between...
And now the 2 giants of Bob Paisley and Liverpool, Brian Clough and Forrest, and getting a phone call within 5 minutes. I mean, this is weird stuff. And Clough knew about me because I knew about Clough because he's from Middlesbrough. And when I used to be stuck for hours in a car park, and I used to do other sort of weird things that only a maverick can do around town to get a better... Brian Clough used to do that, Brian Clough. So I knew his name so well. I just couldn't believe it was him to start with because there were so many Mickey takes in the dressing room. I thought it's someone taking a Mickey, right? But it wasn't. It was him. And he'd probably had a few beers, and he was in Mallorca, as you do. And it wasn't meant to be, but he did say, I'm going to build the whole team around you. You're the player I want. And it just didn't resonate with me at that time.
Sure.
But having said that, Dad was 100% right. And Cloughie could be the way that his alcohol went when you think about it. And he did get people. He rubbed people the wrong way. So I'd love to spend more time with him because I'm a maverick. In the way I think. I should never have been a footballer. That's the interesting thing here. But I wanted it so badly, I found out how to do it. It's like...
just saying with that, what would you have done if you didn't become a footballer? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, I studied for it. I wanted to be a doctor or an architect, and I was studying to do that. Wanted to be a surfer. Then when I found out about cameras, I wanted to be a photographer, which I've managed to do. Videographer. By the way, my story's an interesting one, and I've never had the time to stop and tell it properly. This is probably the most in-depth I've ever got on the second part of the story, right? And some of the detail, like the people you've met, I've never talked about Brian Clough or any of that stuff like we have. But I it's a bit like the rubber boot. I see it 20 years ahead of everyone. The Big Bash of soccer, I see it. Super skills, another thing which is the thing that really made me bankrupt personally, a long time that the Predators have, which is a grassroots youth development project endorsed by FIFA, and it was used at the time by the British government in schools. None of this stuff's been told. And I'm still working on it, and it's over there. But what I've got to do is I've got to tell my story, my own story, in my own words, pictures, and music, as a show. But that's not the real story, because that show will be part of a Netflix documentary, a 3-part series that tells all these little bits. In fact, that's why there's a couple of cameras here.
A lot more cameras than we normally have. That's for
there
Netflix.
There you go.
And that's another thing too, is that you, even when you're making the Predator boot, that documentary that you showed before, you filmed all that yourself and went to the BBC. And
that's it.
The BBC and said, I've already done this. I've done the work for you. Is this the same thing as what you for Netflix? You'll have it all for them?
100%. 100%. In fact, I'll have it almost finished. I quit soccer.
Would it be a fair assumption to say in your early days, I listened to a lot of interviews.
There's my
with
dad,
you.
look.
Yep, it's your dad.
Dad and Reg, Lake Macquarie,
That would be on the-
Burrigal High School.
That's the Burrigal High School grounds. Yep.
Doesn't look happy, does he?
Well, I was just about to say, back in your early days, a lot of your interviews, you seemed angry in a lot of interviews.
Yeah, I did. This
like
is
an
at
angry
Burrigal.
man.
This is at
That's
Burrigal
the
High
wall?
School.
Is that the wall?
That's the wall. Yeah. No, I watched that too. And I said, why am I so angry? You know, I had so much to be happy about. Why am I angry?
So you feel like you're a different person now, totally?
Well,
what
we
you
all,
were?
we all grow up, even yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good old Dad. He made me laugh, that bloke. He never didn't make me laugh, old Dad.
But isn't it funny? You went ahead and shot all this. So that's the thing, is that you're always, it's like you're forward thinking in everything you do. You're always thinking 3 steps ahead, which is pretty much what a great footballer has to do as well.
Do you know what? Well, yeah, in a different way. You see, this is a documentary on BBC One and it's called Craig's Boot. It was an hour-long program. Adidas didn't have any money. They couldn't pay me. So I put together this little series of stories that I then sold to the BBC. Now, the clever thing about the Predator wasn't the boot itself. That's a remake of the FA Cup final goal at Lake Macquarie. Look, there's me on the far post. Look.
You're a producer.
So what I was getting to, if you just hold that for a sec, mate, right, because it's all interesting. But what I was getting to, look, what part of foot on what part of ball to what effect. The more you get into my story, the more you'll understand there's some basic fundamental overriding principles. There's only 4 or 5 that tell the whole story anyway. So the success of the Predator boot, and therefore the recovery of Adidas as a brand, they had no money. I was a cameraman, right, because of the Channel 9 experience and my growing up. So I went and filmed all this stuff, took it to the BBC. Then, on a Wednesday night, BBC One, 6:30 on a Wednesday night, 8.5 million people saw the Predator documentary. The next day, you couldn't buy the Predator, and it was like 100 and odd quid, $200. Yeah. You couldn't buy it because of the story, but it didn't cost Adidas a penny. It cost me. And I made the story. So now, because the Big Bash of soccer hasn't happened in Australia, but it's also going to happen in Europe as well with the Champions League Super Sixes. It's going to happen. There's no doubt. It has to happen. The only way to make it happen is to tell the story, to get past all of those gatekeepers that are stopping you. And had I not done the documentary and filmed it myself with my own money and my own cameras, the Predator would never probably have been realised as what it is today, which is a standalone multi-billion-dollar business, the Predator itself.
Yeah.
So I'm actually telling you now part of the story of the making of the Big Bash of soccer right now, and how it hasn't happened to this sport. And somebody, Amazon, Netflix, Apple, say, hang on a sec, Big Bash of soccer. Or you mean same great clubs, same great players, same great stadiums, except 20 goals in half the time, a game in half the time, with the upcoming metaverse, and it's live and it's shot in 3D, and all the assets have already been paid for.
Yeah.
Tell me what the real problem is, please.
I think what we mentioned before about the fact that people are employed to do a job, and an outsider comes in and does this. That's the thing I see that's the handbrake on a lot of things where, you've got people that are getting paid lots of money to do this, and someone comes and there's the ability to make them look stupid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Channel 9, Channel 10, Fox, Channel 7, ABC, SBS, I don't mind. Hasn't one of them got enough balls to say, oh, hang on a sec, this is a good idea and could make us a lot of money and could make me look good by getting it before the others do? So let's go further with the conversation and the problem, because that's how the problem gets solved. And the Predator as an item, nobody heard of the Predator.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the storytelling, it would never have been made. I'd have still had 100 prototypes and spent $500,000 on what's it called, patents. Which once they started making money, they stole the patents.
You got a good track record of making television. I think there was the show The Main Event. I mean, how'd you get into that? What made you want to start a game show?
You know what? I think I say it here. I just love television and the making of it, because I was at Wide World of Sports for a bit.
Yeah.
There he is, Larry Ebder.
Welcome back to the main event. This is round number 2, and there are 50 points up for grabs. As we take a look at the scoreboard, we're locked in, 20 points a pop. Celebrities, you know what we're doing. We're racing for the brand new Subaru motor car. Let's take a look at our grand prize tonight. James, why don't you play it in? Here it comes, the Subaru Sports Wagon Limited
James
Edition
Morrison.
4-wheel drive.
Here comes Subaru's limited edition four-wheel drive sports wagon that's giving the top dogs a real run for their money.
Larry's the gold Logie, the current gold Logie winner.
Yeah.
I suppose you launched him. I mean, he was a reporter before that, but as far as being a game show.
Channel 10 news sport reporter. I was at 9, but I didn't know who he was, but I just liked where he was coming from, and I knew that blokes didn't mind him because he were blokey, but the girls liked him. So I thought that's your prime time family demographic, as you can see. So that's Dipper Domenico's team versus Lisa, I think, the athlete, the Olympian.
But I mean, was this 9 or 7? I thought it was Channel 7.
This was Channel 7, yeah. I was at 9 with Wide World of Sports and Kerry Packer for a long time, 5 or 6 years. Then I was at 7 for 2 or 3 years.
Wouldn't it have been easier to get that show over the line at Channel 9, seeing they had...
No, they didn't want it.
Wow.
You know, same thing, gatekeepers.
That's even after
they're programmers, they're called. You know what programmers are.
Yeah.
And they are paid and they don't want to be shown up, so they become that gatekeeper. It's human life. It's how you get the mortgage paid, by being a gatekeeper.
Yeah. And this wasn't just in Australia too. It was...
I sold it all around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good old Larry, I need to catch up with him.
I think he needs to buy you a beer.
I think so. That'd be nice. He's a good boy.
I mean, I was going to ask this question before, but you've done so many things. We've spoken about a lot of things. Is there a time that you would love to go back to if you could be transported back into time? And it doesn't have to be sporting. It could be obviously anything that we've spoken about or anything we haven't spoken about. That you could have maybe have done better or just a fond memory.
Oh, plenty of places where I could have done better. Plenty.
Well, let's stick with a fond memory.
You know, just the opposite. Getting out of that hospital bed with my leg intact as a 6-year-old. We used to play a game at Spears Point Primary School called Red Rover Crossover.
Yep.
And just that was so exciting and exhilarating because you had 2 groups of teams running at each other, almost rugby league style. And I just found out at that stage, and this was after my leg had recovered, because the doctor said I could never do competitive sport. I had to surf or play golf, but I couldn't have contact sport. And Red Rover, I got stuck in and people punched me and I punched people. But just the exhilaration of it. And then when the soccer came, I just fell in love with the game. I just fell in love with it. And because it was part of the culture, you know, and then when I got to Booragal, you know, I do remember watching Match of the Day on a Monday night in the ABC, and then next in black and white television, and then the next day going to the quadrangle at Booragal, Tredenick, all of those guys, Cowburns, McClellans, we're all there. We would all talk about it, and it was just something that we shared. So us guys, we were the soccer nerds, you know, and it was just special.
Yeah.
The ties that bind.
Yeah.
So those days were special, and then having the dream to go over there and do it. And I didn't tell anybody when I went. I didn't tell them that Mum and Dad were selling up and pay, because I was embarrassed, because I thought that they deserved it more than I did.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the stuff I block out, you know, and it comes back years later, and I guess that's why I get emotional. So recently, to answer your question in a different way, I just go down to Nobby's and sit there. And I guess I did as a kid, you know. And the bizarre thing, you sit there and you're, I don't know, 11, 12, 13-year-old, whatever, and you dream, and you dream. And then you're 64, like last weekend, and you go back and you sit in the same place, and you've had the dream, you know, you've realised it, and you go, oh my goodness, did I really do all of that? And it all comes gushing back, you know. And Jenny, I took Jenny down there, and we in the summer, and when you're young and carefree, and wrote our name in the sand, and the love heart, you know.
That's beautiful, Craig.
No, well, I'm not crying because I'm soft. Yeah, it's just real, you know, and maybe it's just real, and I blocked it out, and you can cut this bit out if you want, please. So, having gone and spent all this time all over the world and embracing other people's cultures and, you know, loving them as well, loving them. Then you come back to your own. It's pretty special, and I feel blessed. I really do, and I'm a good Catholic boy, and to that extent, you know, you've got to give back, and you got to write, because you've been so blessed in your life to give back to the people in the place you came from. That's what I believe. And I'm trying, and telling my story without bursting into tears is one of my final ambitions in life, because I think once the story's told, then I've told it, and I don't have to come back to it, because there's a bunch of stuff over there that I'm really keen to finish before I pop off.
Yeah. What we might do is we've got a bit of a promo of this this stage show that's going to tell your story at the next club on August 23.
Okay.
It's going to be hosted by Matty Johns, and sing-alongs with the music by Love That Hat. How good's that band? I hope they've got
the best in Australia, as far as I'm concerned. I mean that.
Have they got their Chris Rea songs at the ready?
I'm meeting them tomorrow about exactly that thing and the Beatles songs.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're doing a Beatles mashup and a Chris Rea mashup, and of course a Cold Chisel meets Morning of the Earth soundtrack. You know, in my early days, I told you I wanted to be a surfer. Yep. And all my mates all had that rite of passage, travelling up the coast. And I never got to do that. but the music of the day was the Morning of the Earth soundtrack.
Yeah.
And it means an awful lot to me. So we're going to try and do all of this stuff. So the one word, it's nostalgia. I think nostalgia is a really important thing. And you asked me that question, what's the one thing that you look back fondly on? And it's very important to do that because, as I said to you, you've got to dream when you're young. You've got to dream because that gives you purpose and meaning. But once you've had the dream, and I said this to the Jets recently, the dressing room, they asked me to come and do it. They were playing against Sydney FC a couple of years ago, and they'd been beaten 3 or 4 times by them. When the dream's over, then you've got to come back and you've got to look over it and evaluate it and be thankful for the fact that you've actually achieved, you know. And also what I did, you know, I get criticised now and again for not playing for my country. And as I have said several times, I played for Australia every single time I pulled on that red jersey. I was representing my country. Make no mistake about it. And about 3 or 4 years ago, when I came back to Newcastle, I got the opportunity to coach the young Socceroos at McDonald Jones Stadium. And again, that's me giving back to my country. So I wanted to do more of that, and that hasn't really happened, which is a shame, but you live and learn. But that's what I said to the kids. I said, when I was your age, 15 and 16, I didn't know what the devil was ahead of me, what I could achieve, what I couldn't achieve. I said, I just didn't know. I said, but now here I am looking at you guys, right? You don't know. I said, but I know everything that I did that you're about to do. I said, I just want to give you these insights as to that. So I've done that with the Australian schoolboy soccer team as well, more recently last year. You know, again, another idea was to take the Australian schoolboys to Liverpool specifically and put the Craig Johnston Cup on at Liverpool, Everton, Man United, Man City, Australian schoolboys every year. 6-a-side, by the way. Yep. Not the full game. We don't need the full game. There's too much full game. Let's learn the skills before we get on a big pitch, guys. Hello. See how I never switch off from work? It's all... I know. My feelings as a human being are tied to, if you like, the blessings I've been given, and I have a duty to give back, and that's why I'm trying to do.
And you can get all your tickets from oztix.com.au. That's oztix.com.au. Should be a good night, Craig.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I want it to be. No tears. Can't guarantee that, but plenty of laughs. And already the knives are out and people saying, oh, Matty Johns, he's a rugby bloke. Couldn't you get a soccer bloke? No, I'm the soccer bloke. Matty's the fun bloke from Cessnock who loves soccer, big Liverpool fan, as his brother, Joey, and he'll bring the fun. You've got a world-class band as far as I'm concerned. I just think they're sensational musicians. Yep. And Matty and the band will get on with each other really well. And then there's another trick to this. So there could be a backup band called the Soccer Moms. Yes. And that's the Soccer Mums that can back up the band with the vocals, but they can also get the Soccer Mums up for a dance contest, right? And the winning Soccer Mum will win a signed Liverpool shirt for their table or their club that they're from. So as much as selling individual tickets, we're going to try and get Lake Macquarie FC table, Adamstown Rosebuds, Lambton Jaffers table, Cessnock table, and Maitland table. So
you should get the Jaffers. You used to play for them. It's a good sell.
Hello. Yeah. That's why I said, well, good. So, and then Maddie can have fun with that, you see. So then we might have a dad juggle off. So on each table there'll be a soccer ball. So you could be Jaffers versus Cessnock versus Maitland, for example, right? And you just got to joggle in a little square, just stand up a little square, and the last one to drop the ball, he wins the shirt. So
how many can you juggle at the moment?
I don't know. It depends how many beers I've had, which will probably be a lot on the night. But I'm doing the serious bits.
Yeah.
So there's 3 acts, but then Maddie and the band are doing the 4 bits in between. So it's at three and a bit hours. But they'll laugh, they'll cry, they'll dance, they'll have nostalgia, a little bit like those clips with Cluffy coming out of the woodworks. Yeah. In fact, you know what? We might have some of this show on there.
That'd be great.
If that's all right with you.
A great exposure.
There you go.
Craig, it's been a pleasure. Let's hope that I know this night is going to be a success for you and carries on with all your good work that you're always doing.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the show, and good luck with the show. And let's hope we don't bomb out between us.